The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 221-240. Chapter 221-Resurrection Stone. Seal slashed at the base of the ring with a sword, and the black mist that had been floating in the air began to scream harshly as if it had suddenly received some stimulation. The scream seemed to pierce his soul, causing Sirius, who was still running, to stop at once, and subconsciously covered his ears with his hands. Fortunately, this sonic attack didn't last long, and the golden flame burning on the blade burned cleanly along the black mist. At this time, Blake only had the mind to stare blankly at Seal, who was holding the fire and wearing the golden flame armor, and fell into contemplation for a while. After a long time, Blake twitched the corner of his mouth and complained to Seal, "This is how many years has Hogwarts been playing the melee route?" Hearing Blake's complaints, Seal became playful for a while, and then responded, "Of course, keep pace with the times. You don't know that my teacher has a cane in the left hand and a long sword in the right hand, with a muggle on his back. Limited to Kate Meow Skin Ack Big Baby, I am quite proficient in one-handed flashing and storm swordsmanship." Quote. Blake looked at Seal's serious expression, and couldn't help showing an expression like "I don't read much, don't lie to me." Blake, who fell into self-doubt no matter where Charles was, stepped forward to look at the resurrection stone that had fallen off, picked it up, and carefully examined the legendary 3 holy artifacts. Because Seal didn't want to meet someone who was at fault, the resurrection stone was just an ordinary ruby in Seal's hands, so Seal didn't see anything wrong. On the other hand, Black looked at Seal's actions and fell into deep thought again. At this time, he also clearly saw that Seal's purpose was not so much a ring as it was this ruby. "Is there a problem? This stone?" Blake finally couldn't help asking his own question. Seal glanced at Blake, his eyes continued to fall on the prismatic ruby, and he answered Blake's question nonchalantly. "Resurrection stone, the 3 hallows of death, you should know, this is the resurrection stone." As soon as Seal's voice fell, Blake's breathing became heavier in an instant, and he stared at the resurrection stone in Seal's hand. Urdu wondered if Blake was about to start robbing. Looking at Blake, who was breathing heavily, Seal sighed helplessly and waved away the flames on his body. Gryffindor's sword disappeared along with the flames on Seal. "You should know that there is no resurrection magic in this world, and the function of the resurrection stone is also explained in that fairy tale book." Seal kindly persuaded Blake, who had a longing expression on his face, and Blake's eyes that were still glowing dimmed immediately after hearing Seal's words. Lowered his head and whispered to Seal, "I know, Seal, but I just want to meet and say sorry. If it wasn't for my arrogance, James and Lily wouldn't either." Sirius was interrupted by his own sobbing before he could finish speaking. Seal looked at the middle-aged Sirius standing in front of him like a child who made a mistake and sobbed softly. "Some are unbearable. Okay, the time is only 1 hour. Do remember, don't get immersed in it, this is not a real resurrection." After Seal finished speaking, he threw the resurrection stone in his hand towards Sirius. When Sirius saw Seal throwing the resurrection stone over, he couldn't take care of his messy face. He caught the resurrection stone with all his hands and was about to thank Seal when he was beaten by Seal. "Cut off, you still have 59 minutes, Uncle Black, I'll be waiting for you here. Remember not to indulge, I hope you can be punctual, after all, I still want to go back to school to rest." After finishing speaking, Seal found a chair and sat down on his own, and began to operate his own flames to perform special effects, completely ignoring Sirius. Seeing Seal like this, Sirius bowed to the Seal drama as if he was holding a rare treasure in his hand, and then strode upstairs. It wasn't until Sirius disappeared on the first floor that Seal sighed slightly. He didn't know what to say, and he felt a little uncomfortable for a while. It was Sirius' performance that made Seal once again determined to protect everything around him. There were enough tragedies in the original book. Unfortunately, Seal was the kind of person who didn't like tragedies. Shaking his head, Seal finally recovered from the inexplicable sadness, and began to control his own flame wholeheartedly. "It's really good, but the plot of this King Kong gourd baby versus the Avengers is more confusing." An hour later, just as Seal was nodding in a sleepy state, and when the flame drama in front of him could not be seen from the Vajra Gord verses. Avengers, Blake walked upstairs with red eyes but an excited look. Down. At this moment, Seal seemed to have seen his relatives. Before Blake could say anything, Seal rushed forward and grabbed the resurrection stone in Blake's hand. After leaving a message that he had something to say tomorrow, he went in without looking back. In the secret road. This made Blake, who wanted to thank Seal for a while, at a loss for what to say. It was not until Seal disappeared into the depths of the tunnel that Blake reacted. Looking at the empty screaming shack, Blake felt for the first time that Seal was not the scheming little fox in his impression, but had the temperament of a teenager. Shaking his head, Blake looked at the entrance of the secret passage where Seal disappeared, and said to himself with a smile on his face, "Anyway, Seal, you are indeed my Blake's good friend." Of course, Seal, who was already trapped into a dog, didn't know it. At this time, Seal was full of his own soft and warm little bed. As for the rest, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Accelerating all the way, carefully bypassing Filch, who was patrolling, Seal just lay down on his cot before 12 o'clock, and a huge sense of satisfaction suddenly wrapped Seal. Only then did Seal think about how to use this resurrection stone. Of course, it was Seal's normal operation to add up and fall asleep. Seal, who was still planning everything, unknowingly began to snort happily, and even forgot to change his clothes into pajamas. As for the resurrection stone is still lying quietly in Seal's pocket at this time, and I don't know what the expression of Seal's roommate would be if he knew that the artifact from the fairy tale he read when he was a child was by his side. Chapter 222 The eve of the hearing. Early the next morning, when Seal was woken up by the alarm clock, he remembered that he still had the resurrection stone, one of the 3 hallows of death, in his pocket, so he carefully found a cloth bag and hung it around his neck. Superior Sha'ur showed that he didn't plan to tell his teacher about it. After all, if this thing is used well, it can be said to be an artifact that fulfills regrets, and if it is not used well, it is an accelerator that makes people die. Even Seal doubted whether Dumbledore's death-seeking in the original book had something to do with this thing, so the cautious Seal still planned not to tell his teacher about this, or that sentence. The time was not up. Just as Seal put on the cloth bag and patted the resurrection stone and the philosopher's stone on his chest with satisfaction, a loud phoenix chirping sounded from outside the window of Seal's bedroom. Seal opened the window with some doubts, and Fox flew in with a letter in his mouth, flapping its fiery red wings, and threw the letter into Seal's arms. Disgusting, and Fox turned around and flew into Sha'ur gang. Wake up with a warm quilt. Seal watched Fox, very anthropomorphic, with his eyes closed and lying down enjoying himself. He didn't forget to cover the quilt with his wings and was speechless for a while. At this time, Seal felt more and more like his Hogwarts. It's a little different from the original. How should I put it? I don't know why. Seal felt that his Hogwarts seemed a little too self-indulgent compared to the original. With some weird expressions, Seal opened the letter brought by Fox. The letter was written by Dumbledore and contained only the sentence that Buckbeak's hearing would be held at the Ministry of Magic in a week's time. It was then that Shire remembered Malfoy's injury in Hagrid's Fantastic Beasts class at the beginning of the semester, and the poor hippogriff Buckbeak. Seal patted his head in annoyance. There have been too many things recently, and Seal even forgot some things that happened at the beginning of this semester. Fortunately, even if it's Seal who doesn't remember it, many people still remember it. No, Seal, who had just finished the spell class and was about to go to the hall to have a good meal with his friends, saw Hagrid as soon as he left the door of the classroom. Standing awkwardly at the door of the potions classroom, waiting for him. "Hi Charles, I've made lunch sometime, can you come and try my craft with Harry and Hermione and Ron?" Seeing the drunkenness on Hagrid's face that he wasn't drinking, Seal knew that Hagrid's search for him was definitely related to the Buckbeak hearing. In fact, in the morning, Seal was still curious why his teacher had to write to him to explain the time of the hearing, but Hagrid's appearance made Seal understand that maybe he planned to take him to see it this time. The only problem now is Hagrid's lunch. The four of you look at me and I look at you. All four of them looked worried. The reason is actually very simple, but anyone who has eaten Hagrid's stone cake will have doubts about Hagrid's craftsmanship. Hagrid looked at the hesitant four and suddenly understood the crux of the matter, and cautiously leaned over and whispered to the four, "Don't worry, I went to Black Lake to catch fish today, and I have lunch today. It's strictly according to Shire's recipe." After hearing Hagrid's words, the four of them felt relieved and happily followed Hagrid to his cabin. Only Seal was thinking about the hearing all the way. After the four of them were satisfied with Hagrid's meal, Hagrid timidly told Seal about the hearing. "Charles, you should have received a letter from Dumbledore this morning." Seal nodded, and before he could speak, Ron became curious first, and began to keep asking what was going on. Hagrid had no choice but to start explaining science to the three of them. "Buckbeak's hearing is about to start, and the time is set in a week. I went to Headmaster Dumbledore to talk about it, but Headmaster Dumbledore called I can solve it by taking Seal to the hearing. That's why I came to Seal." Hagrid's words made the three of them look at Seal, and they were a little embarrassed to see it, and helplessly spread out their hands and said to the three, "Don't look at me like that, I don't know. What does the teacher mean? But I will definitely help you if you need it, don't worry Hagrid." Hearing Seal's words, Hagrid's eyes turned red for a while, and soon he started sobbing, wiping the tears from his face with a huge handkerchief, holding Seal's hand and thanking him constantly. "Thank you, Charles, for your willingness to help my poor Buckbeak." Hagrid's appearance made Harry and the three of them start to comfort Hagrid, while they began to scold Malfoy, and even started to curse at Slytherin Academy in the end. Looking at the four people who were angry, Seal had a headache for a while, and he made up his mind to go to the principal's office at night to see what the road was. Soon, the time came to night. After everyone fell asleep, Seal climbed up again cautiously, glanced at his soft and warm bed with a little nostalgia, and then Seal tiptoed. Sneak out of the Gryffindor Tower and head towards the headmaster's office. Along the way, Seal was silently complaining in his heart. For some reason, Seal felt that he had been out of bed lately, like Sirius, and the hearing matter. He started to feel that he appeared. Got dark circles. Fortunately, Seal's rants ended shortly after. The reason was very simple. Seal was there, and when Seal opened the door of the principal's room, Dumbledore was sitting behind the desk with a smile. "I'm still wondering when you will come to find me." The blue eyes behind Dumbledore's semicircular eyes looked at Charles with a slight smile. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal was at a loss for words for a while, and after a helpless sigh, Seal naturally sat opposite Dumbledore. "Teacher, don't make fun of me. I've been thinking about it for a day today and don't know why you asked me to go to the Buckbeak hearing. I don't know the people at the hearing at all." Charles said helplessly. Dumbledore didn't care. "It doesn't matter, you don't know them, but your name has been circulating in some people's circles. Believe me, many people are willing to buy your face. This is also part of the exam. I also think you'll be ready when school starts." Seal was a little surprised that Dumbledore would say this. Just as he was about to ask for advice, he was interrupted again by Dumbledore. "Okay, let's not talk about this. Did you meet Sirius last night?" Chapter 223-Night Talk. When Seal heard Dumbledore's words, his eyes were about to pop out, and Seal subconsciously began to wonder if Sirius had already hooked up with Dumbledore. But he quickly denied the idea. Although Loudang did know that Sirius was innocent, he didn't need to worry about it himself. After all, at the beginning of this semester, Loudang had clearly stated that the matter is entirely handed over to Seal, who then provides behind-the-scenes help and support. Sha'ur was at a loss as to what went wrong to let old Dang know that he went to see Black last night. Seeing Seal's shocked and puzzled face, it was only a short while that the situation began to change. It was the first time that Dumbledore smiled so happily, and Seal saw that Dumbledore was very happy, and he didn't hold back anymore. "Teacher, how on earth did you know? You shouldn't have known that I went to meet Blake, and I looked at the Marauders map last night, and you really haven't been out of the office." Sha'ur asked questions with doubts, and had to admit that Loudang's hand was really terrible. Is it okay to quietly grasp Shah-Ur's whereabouts? Seeing Ciel's puzzled look, Dumbledore smiled. Not only do I know that you went to see Sirius last night, I also know that you probably destroyed a Horcrux last night. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel broke into a cold sweat. There was no other reason. Ciel was really afraid that Dumbledore would know what he had in his hands, and Ciel was also afraid that Dumbledore would ask for the Resurrection Stone for him. It's not that Ciel doesn't want to give it. 20 Ciel is simply afraid of the idea that the Resurrection Stone will provoke Dumbledore's sacrifices in the original book. This is the only point that Ciel wants him to happen even if he is killed. Dumbledore ignored Ciel's appearance as if he had seen a ghost, and continued with a smile. You must know that the headmaster generally has some privileges, and one of them is to check whether you are in the school. Unfortunately, you weren't at school last night, and, most importantly, I saw the sword of Gryffindor come back after disappearing under my nose last night. You know, according to your level of strength, a good wizard like Black who just got out of prison would never use a weapon like the sword of Gryffindor. Then there is only one possibility. You must be summoning the sword of Gryffindor to destroy the same and indestructible item. No, it should be said that you only want to destroy a part of this item, otherwise your fire element is enough. As for the items you want to destroy, I came up with Voldemort's Horcruxes, which should be nothing, but I'm more surprised by how many Horcruxes Voldemort made. Hearing Dumbledore's analysis, Ciel gave a wry smile. He was really ignorant, and he never thought that the whole plan would be ruined by a sword. Well, sir, you're right. I did destroy a Horcrux. How many Horcruxes does Voldemort have? I think 7 is a pretty magical number, isn't it? Hearing Ciel's words, Dumbledore's eyes flashed a golden light again, and the blue eyes that were full of smiles suddenly became sharp. He answered Ciel's question slowly. Yes, 7 is really a number for an artifact. Dumbledore paused for a moment before continuing. I'm starting to wonder what you did last night. How about you? Mind sharing your latest adventure with this old man? Charles thought for a while before answering Dumbledore. No, I think it's better to talk about the hearing first, and then talk about the adventure. And teacher, I think it's better to listen to my adventure than to listen to my adventure. Go on an adventure, what do you think? The paid kind. Quote. Hearing Ciel's words, Dumbledore burst into laughter. The boy Ciel actually started to trick himself. For a time, Dumbledore had the feeling of crying and laughing when he saw his grandson pit him. But Dumbledore still answered Ciel's question. Okay, then let's talk about the hearing first. You don't have to worry about it, it's just a transaction. Those purebloods are trying to use Hagrid's love for Buckbeak to force me to give them a chance to see you. It's not so much a hearing as it's a wooing meeting of the goblins behind the purebloods. As for the result, it all depends on how they woo you. Of course, you have to be prepared. After all, there are not only the pure-blooded people here, but even Fudge is actively promoting this matter behind the scenes. After Dumbledore finished speaking, he picked up the cocoa on the table and took a sip, while Ciel fell into deep thought and began to think about how to deal with this matter. After a long time, Ciel rubbed his temples with some headache and said to Dumbledore, Teacher, I don't think it's time to tear up the face, whether it's the goblins or the Ministry of Magic. At least, the bright side. You can't tear your face off. Dumbledore smiled and nodded. That's right, Ciel, don't worry, this is just a test, don't worry too much, just relax, your age is here, even if those people are there if you don't want to. It also takes into account your age, so they will keep testing you until you graduate. In fact, what they want to see is very simple, to see whether it is the second me or the third Dark Lord, they just need to stand in line. So my advice is, just be yourself and don't pay too much attention to those boring adults. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel nodded reassuringly. He also put a big stone in his heart. Ciel was never afraid of a prepared battle. Intelligence warfare was definitely the most important thing in Ciel's heart. Seeing Charles let out a sigh of relief, Dumbledore then continued, Okay, that's all for the hearing, now let's start talking about the adventure you're talking about. Hearing Lao Deng's words, Ciel looked at his teacher speechlessly. and Seal swore that this was the first time he had discovered that Dumbledore was so playful. But then, Seal came up with a brilliant idea, and then a dark-bellied smile began to creep up on Seal's cheeks. "Teacher, this adventure plan of mine is absolutely exciting, but before I explain the reward, I have to make sure of one thing. Teacher, you don't have any thoughts of wanting to die, do you?" Dumbledore, who was still happy at first, took out his wand in a huff after hearing what Seal said, and gave Seal a complete childhood. "What is this called?" Glancing at Seal angrily, Dumbledore said, "If I die, I'll definitely be pissed off by you." Chapter 224-Rob the Bank, Dumbledore. After hearing Dumbledore's unhappy answer, Seal scratched the back of his head and smiled embarrassedly, and an inexplicable embarrassment appeared between the two of them. Dumbledore looked at Seal's appearance and guessed with his heels to know that Seal was definitely not holding back his farts, otherwise, he would not have said such enticing words. With a helpless sigh, Dumbledore continued, "Stop smirking, talk about your adventures and rewards. Seriously, I've begun to wonder what kind of rewards you can give." After hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal corrected his attitude, and a little devil-like smile hung on his face again. "Teacher, trust me, you can't refuse this adventure, because it involves our classmate Tom's Horcrux." As soon as Seal's voice fell, Dumbledore put away his joking attitude, sat up straight, and looked at Seal very seriously. "Oh, talk about it." Hearing that he had successfully aroused the interest of his teacher, Charles jumped up happily, with a treacherous smile on his face, and then continued, "Teacher, believe me, you have never done this adventure. The content is very simple, just 3 words. Quote." Dumbledore looked helplessly at Seal, who was still trying to sell things, and glanced at Seal, who was still selling things, with a headache. Charles also noticed Dumbledore's appearance, and the treacherous smile on his face never went down. "Teacher, I want to ask you to rob a bank." Dumbledore, who was still looking forward to hearing Seal's words, didn't have a heart attack again, but then he thought about the style of Voldemort he knew, and I have to say that hiding in Gringotts is indeed Voldemort's style. Dumbledore thought for a while and then gave Seal a look for Seal to continue. Charles then looked at Dumbledore triumphantly, and then said, "Teacher, according to my information, Voldemort hid a Horcrux in Bella's vault, and strictly speaking, you cannot refuse this Horcrux. Because this Horcrux happens to be Hufflepuff's gold cup." Seeing Seal's smug look, Dumbledore looked at Seal angrily. Indeed, Dumbledore couldn't refuse this reason. After all, Voldemort was definitely a big worry for now. Rubbing his head with some headaches, Dumbledore then continued, "Well, I really can't refuse this, so tell me about your plan." When Charles heard Dumbledore's words, his smile became more and more perverted. "Don't worry, teacher, I have a perfect plan. First of all, I set the date for the hearing. Thanks to the good popularity of the Malfoy family in the Pure Blood, and the news you released about my upcoming participation, most of the Pure Blood and the Goblins will have their eyes on me, and that is the time when you act. And in order to make sure nothing goes wrong, I also arranged a helper for you. I believe my teacher, the magic level of this helper will never be inferior to yours, and it can even be on the same level as you in various duels. I have paid for it. Big price." Looking at Seal's increasingly profiteer face, Dumbledore's mouth twitched involuntarily. If nothing else, at least now Dumbledore is starting to miss the first grade, brother sitting on the ground and crying with his legs in his arms. Pure and kind Charles. At the same time, Dumbledore also became interested in the help that Seal arranged for him, but seeing Seal's treacherous appearance, Dumbledore felt that he didn't need any help. Seeing where Dumbledore was frowning and thinking about something, Seal immediately realized what Dumbledore was thinking. Before Dumbledore could speak, Seal said it first. "Trust me, teacher, you absolutely need a helper, because as far as I know, Bella's treasury is near the bottom of the entire Gringotts, and there is a dragon guard who wants to get what she wants without knowing it. Even you need a helper." Quote. Seeing Seal's sincere and determined look, Dumbledore didn't think much about it. He thought it was because Seal was worried about his own safety that he arranged this, and he didn't think much about it. Rubbing his head with some headaches, Dumbledore nodded helplessly and agreed to Ciel's idea. After all, in every sense, Dumbledore could not give up a known and unknown Horcrux. Well, you succeeded in persuading me. But Charles, you don't want to go with me, but arrange a helper for me, which surprises me a little. Dumbledore, who had accepted the reality, said jokingly to Ciel. After hearing Dumbledore's words, Charles, who was still smiling, twitched inwardly, but he continued with a smile on his face. No way, after all, I have to go to the hearing to attract everyone's attention. Quote. Dumbledore looked at Ciel suspiciously. For some reason, after hearing Ciel's explanation, Dumbledore felt that the smile on his precious student's face became more and more fake. Under Dumbledore's gaze, Ciel felt that something was wrong, and for fear of being noticed by Dumbledore, Ciel immediately got up and prepared to leave, leaving a sentence, I will send the plan to your desk. Elle disappeared into Dumbledore's office as if running for his life. Only Dumbledore looked suspiciously at the gate where Ciel disappeared, and kept thinking about what bad fart Ciel was holding back. As for Ciel, who had just rushed out of the office, rubbed the already stiff expression on his face, and was completely relieved. Of course, Ciel didn't hold back. Is it still Ciel's style not to make troubles? Taking advantage of the bank robbery, Ciel successfully temporarily fooled himself into having the resurrection stone in his hand. As for the bank robbery, Ciel started from the very beginning. Just thought about it. It would be boring if only one Dumbledore went there. 2 Dumbledores would be fun. This was also what Blake thought of when he temporarily changed his plan when he took out Gaunt's ring privately. As for Ciel himself, please, how could Ciel not participate in such a fun thing? It was 2 Dumbledore, and Ciel rubbed his chin while thinking. After a while, a bold idea reappeared in Ciel's mind, and a little devil-like smile appeared on Ciel's face again. Really, even if it is a pair of horns and tails, at this time, Ciel's expression makes people know that this guy is definitely a white cut black, and it is still black and oily. Chapter 225-Shire's arrangement. After planning everything, Charlene ran to his lounge and began to write letters. The first letter, Charlene, was to his parents, asking them to help prepare 2 masks and 2 sets of conjoined pieces. Tooling. The reason is very simple, that is, his teacher is very interested in these muggle things, and he wants to send some gifts. The second letter, Shire, was written directly to Grindelwald, and the content was very simple. I wanted to ask him to come to Hogsmeade, and I needed his help for some fun things. Then the Charsau operation came. Charles asked Fawkes to send this letter very thiefly. The reason is very simple, which would make Dumbledore mistakenly think that the helper he arranged for him was Grindelwald. After everything was arranged, Ciel lay in bed with peace of mind, ready to sleep, and began to look forward to everyone's reply. What Charles did not expect was that, early the next morning, the 2 owls flew back with a large package. After throwing the package in front of Charles, who was having breakfast, the 2 owls flapped their wings. He left without looking back. Ciel couldn't wait to open the package, which contained 2 orange one-piece work clothes and 2 masks similar to the Harvest Day. There was also a letter attached. The letter was written by Charles's father, Mr. William, and the content was very simple. It only gave the source of 2 things, and told Charles to be honest in school. But what you did not expect from Shire is that these 2 orange one-piece work clothes that look like work clothes are actually work clothes. These clothes are gifts that Shire's mother got when she went to the prison for an internship. As for the masks, are for the 2 of them on Halloween. Shire looked at the mask in his hand like the Harvest Day with some doubts, and once again he couldn't help but start to doubt his life. Shouldn't this game be out yet? Is there such a thing at this time? Fortunately, Ciel accepted it quickly, and it didn't take long for him to accept this setting. If nothing else, wearing a mask was indeed in line with what they wanted to do. However, the little friends around Ciel were very interested in the package that Ciel received, especially Hermione, who kept looking at Ciel with a puzzled expression. In this regard, Ciel can only explain that this is a Halloween gift for his teacher, a gift from Dumbledore on Halloween, and this is a late return gift. It doesn't matter whether others believe it or not, Seal believes it anyway. It happened that Seal had no class in the afternoon, and Seal planned to write a plan list and stop by the Pig's Head bar in the afternoon. After flicking a few friends with the reason to take a bath, Seal followed the secret path of the Screaming Hut all the way to the Screaming Hut. In the Screaming Shack, Seal didn't find the existence of Sirius, and it was estimated that he had turned into a big black dog and didn't know where to wander. After Seal simply wrote a message to Sirius, he rushed to the Pig's Head bar. The message was very simple. It just briefly explained Harry's recent situation, and explained that he had controlled Peter, told him not to worry, and showed that he should not show up at school. After all, now Peter is in a state of drunkenness every day under the control of Seal, and if there is another sudden attack by Sirius, it will not be fun if Peter wants to escape in a panic. After arriving at the Hog's Head bar, Seal began to fool Aberforth with the same phrase. Aberforth was a lot easier to fool than his older brother, Albus Dumbledore. Aberforth quickly accepted Seal's statement. No, strictly speaking, Aberforth was indifferent to helping out or robbing a bank. In his opinion, this was just something that he had to do by himself. That's it. What really interested Aberforth was the remuneration that Seal said. After finishing all the details of the bank robbery, Aberforth narrowed his eyes and threatened Seal. Bastard, although you are very much to my taste, I still have to ask you, if I finish you can't pay what you're supposed to pay after what I'm supposed to do, so don't blame me for turning my back on me. After hearing this, Seal just pouted and said, Don't worry, I have got the necessary things. As long as you or your companions complete the things I told you, then I will definitely pay you. After hearing Seal's words, Aberforth waved his hand in disdain to drive Seal away. In fact, Aberforth was really not to blame for this matter. For Aberforth, the reward that Seal said was he really couldn't refuse, even if it was just a fantasy. Aberforth wanted to try it. When Charles saw that Aberforth was chasing people, Charles jumped off the bar chair very interestingly. Before leaving, he remembered something and said to Aberforth, Don't worry, I'll be there in a few days. Bring clothes, masks and wands. Journalists must not use their own wands. I am worried that they will leave traces. Quote. As soon as Seal's voice fell, Aberforth flew over a wine bottle and scolded him. Fuck off, I know this better than you. Seal just flicked his body to avoid the hidden wine bottle that Aberforth had thrown over. After hearing Aberforth's answer, he shrugged and turned away. Just as Seal was walking towards the Screaming Shack, he was still thinking about whether to bring something to eat, when a dark shadow suddenly appeared behind Seal. Before Seal could react, a swirling feeling of being stuffed into a slender rubber tube instantly enveloped Seal. This feeling is very familiar to Seal, and he doesn't know who has apparated him. In an instant, Seal immediately became nervous. When Seal's feet felt the ground again, Seal immediately pulled out his wand and pointed it behind him. Say it again. Except for you tilde. It's a pity that Seal didn't utter the spell he wanted. Fortunately, at this time, a familiar voice rang behind Seal with a tone of disgust. Charles, you should really get used to apparating, you're really easy to be targeted like this. Hearing this sound, Seal put down his wand, and supported his knees with both hands, spitting out a little rainbow on the side. After a long time, his jaw eased, and he rubbed the corner of his mouth, and Charles helplessly looked at the old man standing beside him with a look of disgust. No, Mr. Grindelwald, I don't think anyone would appear behind me in an instant like you, and then apparate with me without saying a word. Chapter 226-Shire's Real Plan. Grindelwald looked at Seal with some disgust. Perhaps it was Seal's sentence that Mr. Grindelwald hit Grindelwald's point, and Grindelwald's tone became somewhat harmonious. He sighed helplessly, explained to Charles. Don't forget I'm still in Ermengarde, so I can't actually be in Hogsmeade. If I'm seen, then I think Dumbledore will have a headache. Hearing Grindelwald's explanation, Seal stood aside and pouted, almost saying, Okay, I believe your sophistry. The words were engraved on his face. Looking at Ciel's expression, Grindelwald really wanted to draw out his wand to help Ciel recall how he taught him when he was in Nurmengard. After calming down for a while, Grindelwald gritted his back molars and said to Ciel, "Tell me, why are you looking for me? The letter didn't make it clear, and I was asked to come here specially. You should know that I'm still investigating the chaotic realm of goblins, and I'm busy every day." Hearing that Grindelwald's tone was a bit wrong, Ciel quickly put down his complaints and began to tell Grindelwald about his transactions with Dumbledore. "It's very simple, teacher. I made a deal with my master Dumbledore and his brother Aberforth. The content of the deal is very simple, about a Horcrux that Voldemort placed in Gringotts. As long as they can bring out the Horcrux, then I will give him a reward that he cannot refuse." Hearing this, Grindelwald suddenly became interested. Dumbledore. How did you get them to act together? Charles put on a wicked smile. "I told both parties that I had arranged for him a helper, but I didn't tell him who it was." After hearing Hill's words, Grindelwald laughed while hugging his stomach, and kept praising Scheer as a genius. After a long time, Grindelwald stopped smiling, and then continued, "Well, it's really interesting, so what exactly did you pay so that neither of them could refuse?" Hearing Grindelwald's words, Ciel took out a red prismatic stone from the small bag around his neck with a mysterious look on his face. Before Ciel could explain, Grindelwald quickly rushed up and took it away. The stone in Ciel's hand began to observe constantly. "Charles, are you the resurrection stone?" Ciel nodded. "That's right, teacher. I guess you should be able to see it. This is the resurrection stone of one of the 3 holy artifacts." Grindelwald fiddled with the resurrection stone for a long time, and then reluctantly returned it to Ciel. When Grindelwald handed over the resurrection stone, Ciel was already stunned. "Teacher, you..." Seeing Ciel's appearance, Grindelwald shook his head with a desolate look on his face. "Put it away. I have completely given up my original idea. Whether it's the resurrection stone or the 3 holy artifacts, it's all over." Ciel didn't say anything, just carefully put away the resurrection stone again. He wanted to say that he knew all about the 3 holy artifacts, but seeing Grindelwald's appearance, it was difficult for Ciel to continue this topic. After a while, Grindelwald came out of his emotions, looked at Ciel and continued, "Well, now I know why you can persuade Dumbledore to help you. Then you call me what's the purpose of coming here? Wouldn't it be for me to show you Dumbledore jokes?" Ciel explained in his heart that in fact, this thing only persuaded one Dumbledore, and the other didn't know about it. He continued to explain his plan, although it also means this, but this is not the main thing. "Listen to me, teacher. I plan to let the master and his brother rob you at a Ministry of Magic hearing on the weekend. Lingay. At the same time, I think we can use the 2 Dumbledore robbing incidents to sneak into Gringotts and investigate things about Chaos Realm. With 2 Dumbledore we're taking cover. I don't think the goblins will find out that we've infiltrated their lair." Hearing Ciel's words, Grindelwald had to admit that Ciel's brain was big, but he was very open, and Grindelwald began to refute Ciel's plan. "First of all, Shire, Dumbledore wrote to me about that hearing, and that hearing was against you, so you can't leave the venue, and you can't follow me to Gringotts again. Internal. Unless you have the ability to clone, and the main thing is, I think according to the level of 2 Dumbledore, they should be difficult to find, so I think your plan is good, but it is not executable." Grindelwald analyzed Ciel's plan very seriously, but as soon as he finished speaking, Ciel put on a wicked smile on his face, and then said, "No, teacher, in fact, I have a way to appear in 2 at the same time. Place. Because my classmate has too many classes this semester, she has a time converter in her hand, which can solve my problem of being in 2 places at the same time. Another point, 2 Dumbledore-level bank robbers are really hard to find, so I'm going to find a way to let them be found. For this I have prepared some Muggle clothes and masks, and also need 2 anonymous strange wand. I think his brother on the plane at the level of my teacher can definitely complete this difficult task and successfully bring out Voldemort's Horcrux. The most important thing is that no one can doubt that the great white magician Dumbledore will rob a bank. The most important thing is that if it is you or me, if it is really discovered, then there is an alibi. After hearing Ciel's words, Grindelwald's expression suddenly became extremely strange. In fact, Ciel's plan was really complete and it was feasible. That's just one point. This dead child really didn't let his teacher down when he stole it. After pondering for a while, Grindelwald nodded in agreement with Ciel's plan, and at the same time agreed with Ciel's idea of preparing 2 unfamiliar wands for Ciel. After that, he made a door key and sent Ciel to leave. Of course, what Ciel didn't know was that after he left, Grindelwald mercilessly sent a complete letter of Ciel's plan to Dumbledore. Of course, I was also hidden in the song. Grindelwald didn't say anything about the Resurrection Stone and Aberforth. The former was because Grindelwald thought Dumbledore already knew it. As for the latter, it was completely Grindelwald's bad taste. I really want to know the expression on Dumbledore's old bee's face when he found out about his student's plan to cheat the teacher. After Grindelwald sighed, he disappeared in place with a puff. Chapter 227 _ The eve of the hearing. Time passed quickly. Today was the time for Buckbeak's hearing. In the early morning, Shire was bombarded by owls and woke up. He looked carefully at the letters from Hagrid on the bed. Shire stretched, and then reluctantly got up from the bed and prepared to wash. While washing, I was sighing that I was really witty and hard work. After all, Ciel has been running around for the hearing plan this week, and he has even ignored his friends. Although Hermione didn't know what Shire was busy with, she saw that Ciel was out of class every day. The state of disappearing is also a little distressed for this little friend. As for Ciel's proposal to borrow a time converter for the weekend, Hermione agreed after a moment of hesitation, and even carefully handed the time converter to Ciel last night, and carefully instructed Ciel several times. Use over and over where you need to pay attention. Seeing the unconcealed worry in his childhood sweetheart's eyes, Ciel comforted him for a long time before he put a smile on the little girl's face again. She even promised to tell Hermione what she was doing recently. Hermione then let Shire go. As for Dumbledore, since he learned about Ciel's complete plan that night, he was both relieved and distressed. The relief is that this wave of Ciel can be said to be an extreme operation. The behavior was merciless. Of course, even if Dumbledore had some small emotions, Ciel didn't know it. After all, Ciel was busy perfecting the plan with Grindelwald this week, and by the way, he also asked Sirius to get a large wave of dangerous chemicals. Speaking of dangerous chemicals, yes, Ciel has been quietly refining something called TNT in the Shrieking Shack this week. Thanks to his high school education in his previous life, Ciel remembers this formula very clearly. As for the result, of course it is good, and even the power is a little bigger than the 3 willy shots that Voldemort received with his face in the 1st grade. Ciel is not worried. After all, the ultimate purpose of this thing is to blow up a shot to attract attention. The only one who expressed concern about this was Grindelwald. After all, after learning about Ciel's past, the former first-generation Dark Lord couldn't help but start to worry about his old concubine. But there is one thing to say, under the operation of Ciel, Grindelwald felt a touch of excitement after a long absence. Of course, it was not only Grindelwald who felt the excitement, but even the 2 Dumbledore felt a touch of excitement after a long absence. Although they didn't know about some of the little preparations that Ciel made, they watched Ciel send him over with an owl, clothes, mask, and a wand. The 2 old people felt the passion that they could only feel when they were young. It's so nice to be young. In the almost identical exclamations of the 2 Dumbledores, the name of the hearing, which was actually read as a bank robbery, and the plan to write and do things was just in the hands of Charles. The curtain slowly opened. After washing up, Ciel pulled out the cluster TNT bomb he had made from under his bed. Looking at the long lead, Ciel showed a satisfied smile. He casually caught 2 owls in the owl room, and Ciel hung the package, which was about the size of an owl, on their feet. After giving an address, Ciel returned to the dormitory with satisfaction. Put on a black combat uniform. Thank you Grindelwald for his emotional support. As Ciel said, he filled the tactical equipment on his chest with various potions and gadgets that could be used, and then waved his wand. When Seal looked into the mirror again, the original Syrian tactical style of Seal had now turned into a white and clean young man in formal clothes. After finishing everything, Seal patted the dust that didn't exist on his body, secretly smug for a while, and then elegantly came to Hagrid's small house. Hagrid was already pacing back and forth in the house at this time, and when he saw Shire coming, Hagrid even felt like he saw a relative he hadn't seen for a long time. Before Seal knocked on the door, Hagrid opened the door of the hut and said to Seal, "My God, thank you Merlin. Seal, you are finally here. Hurry up, we have to go to Ogre Mod, where to go to Diagon Alley and walk to the Ministry of Magic's Foreign Affairs reception to enter the ministry." Seeing Hagrid's anxious look, Seal said with some amusing, "Don't worry, Hagrid, it's still early, not to mention that even if we go early, the hearing won't be delayed because of us. It will be held when it arrives." Quote. Shire had just finished comforting Hagrid when he felt something was wrong. "Hey, Hagrid, why can't we just go straight from Hogsmeade to the Ministry of Magic? Have to go all the way around?" Hearing Seal's question, Hagrid was also a little angry for a while, and answered Seal's question irritably, "Don't mention it. The stewards of the Ministry of Magic refused to open the permission, because we are not people in the Ministry of Magic. You see, it's that stinky, Longclaws." After hearing Hagrid's complaints, Seal could only shrug his shoulders and stop talking, and let Hagrid lead the way. He even wiped his tears secretly occasionally, as if he was worried about his Buckbeak. In the end, Seal couldn't see it, and when he was just walking out of the leaky cauldron, Seal leaned close to Hagrid and said in a low voice, "Don't worry about Buckbeak, Hagrid. No matter what the outcome of this hearing is, I will. We can guarantee that Buckbeak is safe and sound. Trust me and the teacher. Allow Malfoy to do things. We can't let us not do some small things in private, right?" Seeing Seal winking at him and saying something that must never be said in the magical world, Hagrid's mood improved, and he looked at Seal seriously. "Seal, are you telling the truth?" Seeing that Seal looked relieved that I was doing things, he nodded, and Hagrid felt that his mood was cloudy and sunny, and the tall bearded man put a smile on his face again, and even had he began to proudly greet passers-by who frequently looked at him on the road. In the end, Seal couldn't see it, and grabbed Hagrid before entering the Ministry of Magic's phone booth. "Hey, Hagrid, be careful, don't be so happy. At least not so happy during the hearing. After all, our little actions are definitely not suitable for exposure, right?" Hearing Seal's words, Hagrid then reacted, rubbed his face quickly, made a worried expression, and then dragged Seal into the phone booth. I have to say that although Hagrid is not suitable for lying, it is necessary to tell when. If it is about Hagrid's beloved magical animal, even someone as honest as Hagrid will still play flawlessly. Chapter 228-Courtesan Shire. Seal swore that he would never want to walk with Hagrid to the Ministry of Magic again in this life. When Seal came out of the phone booth, he had a hint of recollection of the subway during the morning rush hour in his previous life. Fortunately, it wasn't too long, and Seal simply sorted out the wrinkled and deformed formal clothes, and then came to the entrance of the Ministry of Magic under the guidance of the staff. It was actually Mr. Weasley who received the two. Weasley gave them a big hug after seeing them, and then told them what he knew. "To be honest, Hagrid, the news I got is not good. Malfoy has united a large group of pure blood to initiate this incident, and even many of them are families who previously claimed to be controlled by the Imperious Curse. There are also a small number of people in the Minister who show an indifferent attitude towards this, but these people are all interested in Seal without exception. You must pay attention to these people, Seal." After Mr. Weasley finished speaking, he did not forget to look at Charles. After Charles nodded thoughtfully, Mr. Weasley continued, "According to my information, many people want to take advantage of this. It's definitely not that simple to meddle in Dumbledore's Hogwarts. You must pay attention and even prepare for the worst." Hagrid and Seal looked at each other. There was still a question mark in Hagrid's head, but Seal immediately understood what Mr. Weasley meant. Quite simply, to put it bluntly, Buckbeak played an almost mortal role in this hearing. If Buckbeak didn't die, then there are still some purebloods in the Ministry of Magic who will go to Hogwarts for the reason of being concerned about school safety. Rise, like the future Umbridge. As for CL's arrival, it was purely for the sake of winning the hearing in this inevitable losing hearing, and by the way, let's test whether CL's attitude is biased towards that side in the future. The only thing that made CL more concerned was that Mr. Weasley said that Malfoy was entangled with half of the former Death Eaters, which made CL a little puzzled, and even began to unconsciously think whether this hearing was also for the sake of it. The attack on the World Cup in the summer vacation laid the groundwork. Thinking of this, CL's face was a little gloomy, and he had to let his two teachers know about this. It seemed that Chaos Kingdom had begun to become active and prepare to resurrect Voldemort. There has even been an organization to contact the Death Eaters, which is definitely not good news. CL thought for a while, and when he was approaching the inspection, he pulled Hagrid and whispered his conjecture about the hearing, and that he would definitely not be on Hagrid's side, and he would need to deliberately approach magic. Ministry things. After all, these were all related to CL's next plan, and some even related to his own teacher, Dumbledore. Hagrid didn't seem to care, but was amazed that CL thought so far. He also said that CL didn't need to care about himself. Anyway, CL had guaranteed that Buckbeak would definitely survive, so Hagrid didn't care whether CL was with his own views during the hearing. Having said that, CL gave Hagrid a precaution in advance to prevent the car from rolling over. The two whispered for a while before they checked the wand and led Mr. Weasley to the hearing hall. At this time, the hearing was more like a party because the time had not come. People gathered together in twos and threes to discuss something, and the entrance of Hagrid and CL made the originally lively venue quiet for a while, and then it began to become lively again. Almost in an instant, a lot of people appeared beside CL, and they began to greet CL and introduce themselves. CL also immediately put on a friendly smile and started chatting with everyone. Hagrid watched CL enter the role of a courtesan almost instantly, and was a little surprised for a while. Fortunately, everyone here was not interested in Hagrid, and he pushed Hagrid away from CL in a few seconds. Around. Hagrid himself was not good at this kind of communication, and he was happy and leisurely, so he walked to his seat and sat down. However, CL was busy for a while and was a little dizzy. According to CL's observation, many purebloods came to his side and began to chat with him, including some officials of the Ministry of Magic. The only ones who were far away from CL were some of Voldemort's die-hard purebloods, who showed a look of disdain to the crowd on CL's side, and even faintly contempt. The only exception may be Mr. Malfoy. At this time, Malfoy seemed to be sitting on a needleboard. He wanted to leave the Death Eater circle around him, but he didn't dare. Very distressing. Fortunately, Malfoy's embarrassment did not last long, as Minister of Magic Fudge led Umbridge and a large group of Ministry officials into the venue. Fudge discovered the existence of CL almost immediately after entering the venue. "Ha, look who is here. Dumbledore's student CL Lancaster. Welcome, little CL, this is your first time at the Ministry of Magic." After hearing Fudge's words, Charles smiled and saluted Fudge. "Yes, Mr. Minister, this is my first time at the Ministry of Magic." Seeing CL saluting him slightly, Fudge's mood suddenly improved, and a happy smile appeared on his face immediately. "Welcome, little CL, how is the Ministry of Magic?" The smile on CL's face deepened, and he bowed slightly and said to Fudge, "Excellent. It's very spectacular, Mr. Minister. I think my first choice after graduation may be to join the Ministry of Magic. After all, there is a kind boss who is a very wonderful thing, isn't it?" After speaking, he didn't forget to wink at Fudge. After Fudge heard what CL said, the smile on his face almost overflowed, and he couldn't help but patted CL on the shoulder. "Well said. I think the Ministry of Magic will need elites like you in the future, Ms. Umbridge. I think we can arrange an intern position for Shire during the summer vacation. Let him familiarize himself with our Ministry of Magic in advance, how about?" Umbridge replied sweetly with a smirk on his face. "Of course, Mr. Minister, I'll make arrangements." Charles kept the smile on his face unchanged, and replied very sincerely, "Thank you for your generosity, Mr. Minister, but I think I am still too young. If I enter the Ministry of Magic now, there will definitely be people talking behind my back." The minister employs people casually, and even grabs some places for seniors and sisters who are about to graduate. This will affect your reputation and allow me to study for a few more years so that I can better help the minister and Ms. Umbridge, isn't it? Hearing Ciel's words, Fudge and Umbridge were already overjoyed. The two stood in front of Ciel and showed their thumbs to Ciel. Fudge even stepped forward and put his arm around Ciel and said beside Ciel, "Good job. I'm optimistic about you. Ciel, stay at the Ministry of Magic for some tea after the hearing, and then I'll send someone to see you off." Back. Chapter 229-Hearing and Shire, who left halfway. After listening to the invitation from the abdominal muscles, Ciel nodded repeatedly and said that it was his honor, but his heart was almost nauseated by himself. If it weren't for Sirius, why would Charles need to please Fudge, who has an abs like this? All of a sudden, Ciel actually understood Snape's heartache as a spy. Especially Umbridge. That pink coat and her sweet voice didn't make Ciel sick to death, and the nickname of the pink toad really deserves its name. Sure enough, there was only the wrong name and no wrong nickname. At this time, Sirius was not around. If he was around, Ciel would definitely carry his wand and say something to Sirius. Fortunately, Shire's nausea didn't last long, and Fudge went to the main seat and began to announce that the hearing was about to start, and everyone took their seats. When everyone was seated, Shire accompanied Hagrid to the defendant's seat, and Malfoy came to the plaintiff's seat. To be honest, it was the first time that Ciel stood in a position like this in his 2 lifetimes. He felt a little fresh for a while, and even looked around for a while. Seeing that everyone was standing, Fudge pretended to knock the hammer and loudly announced the start of the hearing. As Fudge's words fell, Malfoy's side began to count the suffering of his son. If Charles didn't know what happened, Charles even thought that Draco had been killed by Buckby. Graham bit off his arm and became disabled. Even in the end, Malfoy began to criticize the safety of Hogwarts, and Hagrid had to slap the table several times to stand up to confront Malfoy, but without exception, he was held back by Ciel. Old Malfoy stopped after talking for a long time, and looked at Hagrid with some pride, but unexpectedly didn't dare to look at Ciel. Fuji rubbed his head with a headache, and then asked, "So does the defendant have any rebuttal?" Charles then stood up, bowed gracefully to the hearing and jury benches, and then continued, "Dear everyone, we admit that we had an accident during the Hogwarts Fantastic Beasts course. Buckbeak the Hippogriff also did harm to our Mr. Draco Malfoy. There's no arguing that, but it would be absurd to say that Hogwarts' safety was a problem. As a classmate of the victim, I happened to be at the scene when Malfoy was injured, and I can testify as a witness that the Hogwarts class was completely flawless, and could even be said to be extremely safe. As for Mr. Malfoy's injury, it was purely because he did not follow the operation procedure given by the teacher. I think all of you have gone to school, and many of them even graduated from Hogwarts. If the students are injured due to improper operation, they doubt the safety of the school. Then I think Mr. Snape, the professor of our potions class, should have entered the ASCA class long ago. After all, the number of students admitted to the hospital due to improper operation in potions class is several times that of Fantastic Beasts class, right?" As soon as Ciel's voice fell, there was a burst of whispers throughout the hearing, mixed with a lot of muffled laughter. People fell into nostalgia for the embarrassing things their former classmates did in various classrooms. The only one who was relieved was Malfoy, which was not what he wanted to do at all. The Death Eaters behind the helpless group, I want him to be this early bird. Of course, Malfoy didn't show all of this. After seeing that what he said was unsafe at Hogwarts was rejected by Shire, Malfoy was very tactful and retorted with a loud voice after seeing that the situation was wrong. "But my son is indeed injured. I demand an account for my son in accordance with the Magical Creatures Control Act." Because of Malfoy's words and the excellent communication performance of Charles sitting in the dock just now, the noisy hall suddenly became the scene of the British Parliament. The wave of people who supported Seal and the wave of people who supported Malfoy began to fight each other, and they were about to throw shoes or eggs and other hidden weapons. Seeing that the situation was not right, Fudge knocked on the gavel in his hand and said loudly, "Now adjourn. The jury needs to discuss." As soon as Fudge finished speaking, Seal pulled Hagrid away. After Shire pulled Hagrid and sat down on the chair at the entrance of the hall, Shire began to explain to Hagrid, "Hagrid, the court will start later. No matter what Malfoy says, you have to refute and delay as much as possible. Time, you must show that you are trying your best to be by Buckbeak's side, although the final result will not change anything, but you must believe in me and Dumbledore." Hagrid nodded very firmly. Just as he was about to say something, Malfoy pushed open the door and walked out. Seeing Shire and Hagrid, Malfoy snorted coldly and sat down on the forehead bench opposite them. Hagrid looked at Malfoy, then at Seal, and sighed softly before nodding to show that he knew. Seeing Hagrid nodded, Shire smiled reassuringly, then stood up and asked in a loud voice, "Hagrid, do you know where the toilet is? I seem to have something wrong with what I ate in the morning. I need to go to the toilet." Hearing Seal's words, neither Hagrid nor Malfoy thought much for a while. Hagrid kindly told Seal to walk down the corridor to the end, and then turn left for the second door. After Seal said his thanks, he clutched his stomach and trotted away from the sight of the two of them. After running all the way to the toilet to find a compartment, Seal carefully took out Hermione's time turner from the bag containing the resurrection stone on his chest. After waving his wand and changing his formal clothes back to his previous combat uniform, Seal checked a lot of things on his combat uniform, and then he put on the time converter with confidence. After taking a deep breath, Seal chanted the battle with a sense of ceremony. Then resolutely toggled the time converter. All of a sudden, the scenery around Seal began to regress rapidly, and Seal even saw a man walk into the toilet, go to the toilet in his cubicle in the opposite direction, and then go backwards. It made Seal sick all of a sudden, and swore to himself that he would never use the toilet as a time changer next time. After successfully flipping a few times, Seal listened, looked at the watch in his hand, and after confirming the time, Seal called out softly, "Fox." As soon as Seal's voice fell, the tall phoenix fox appeared on Seal's shoulder along with the flames, and looked around in disgust. Charles ignored Fox's appearance, took out a map from his arms, and whispered to Fox, "Please send me here in Diagon Alley, thank you Fox." Chapter 230-2 Dumbledore's Friendly Exchange. When Seal opened his eyes again, he appeared in a small alley in Diagon Alley. After thanking Fox, Fox tilted his head and glanced at Seal, and disappeared into flames without saying a word. In front of Charles. Seal is still a little strange. Today's Uncle Fox doesn't know why he would give face like this. Of course, he would never have thought of killing Seal. Dumbledore explained all this in advance. Not to mention that Grindelwald and Dumbledore are both cunning and cunning. If they didn't communicate with each other in advance, they wouldn't have a good meal of dried fish. How would Master Fox listen to this little cutie like Charles? Seal shook his head, put his doubts behind his head for a while, pulled out a cloak from his arms and draped it over his body, and used a little magic to make it invisible, and then he walked out of the alley with confidence. "I came to a food shop, and according to the agreement, Grindelwald will wait for Seal here." As for why Seal can take out such a huge thing as a cloak from the tactical pocket on his chest, of course it is the effect of the space expansion spell, but Seal's level is not so high, and he can't make it like his own small suitcase. The same permanent expansion, but the temporary cuz wave Doraemon is still no problem. As soon as Sha'ur approached the store, a middle-aged man gestured towards Sha'ur and gestured for Sha'ur to come over and sit down. Sha'ur did not hesitate, walked over honestly, and looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. "I have to say that Grindelwald's human body transfiguration is definitely at the master level, and Sir King is very envious, and he is determined to find a time to find Grindelwald to learn." If nothing else, the man in front of Seal, who is exactly the same as Brad Pitt's furious character in the movie, has already made Seal begin to be interested enough in Grindelwald's magic that comes with his own compound decoction. Seeing Ciel's chair staring at him stupidly, Grindelwald was a little puzzled for a while. Is there anything wrong with me looking like this? Ciel shook his head and continued, no, to be honest, teacher, I was a little reluctant to recognize it at first. Hearing Ciel's words, Grindelwald laughed dumbly, shook his head and continued, I used this hawk sauce ministry of magic with a big face decades ago, and after I came out this time, I didn't want to think about anything else, so I just set it on. Baby. Hearing Grindelwald's words, Ciel became more and more interested in Grindelwald's body transformation technique. Why would he forget Grindelwald's stunt during the summer vacation of his first year? Just when Ciel wanted to set up a wave of Grindelwald to see when the great god would have time to guide him, this little cute newcomer, he found that Grindelwald was looking at a wall next to him with relish, his face hanging on his face. The smirk that can captivate thousands of beautiful girls like watching an interesting TV series. Ciel looked at the strange Grindelwald with some doubts, but in the end he couldn't help but wonder, teacher, what are you doing? After Grindelwald heard Ciel's words, he didn't even turn his head. He took out his wand very perfunctorily and tapped it on Ciel's forehead. Then, in Ciel's field of vision, the originally dark brick wall began to gradually change. With transparency, even Ciel's faint swearing could be heard. This time, Ciel was also interested, and he began to concentrate on it. Sure enough, after Ciel concentrated, the whole picture became clear, and even the voice became clear. Old bastard, how dare you appear in front of me? A chubby man wearing a mask and a one-piece orange suit cursed while using the wand in his hand to keep throwing rays of various colors to attack the opposite people. The person on the opposite side looked tall and thin, wearing the same orange jumpsuit and the same mask. With a helpless look, he used the wand in his hand to understate the various magics that flew over. Calm down, Aberforth, I don't know what Ciel's arrangement is. I don't mean to provoke you. Looking at the picture in front of him, Shah-Ur was speechless. They both wore masks and changed their clothes. The two of them were still familiar with each other and recognized each other. They clearly cared about each other, but on the surface they looked bitter and hated. Ciel reluctantly touched his temples, looking at the excited Grindelwald who was watching the fun. He rubbed his temples again with a headache, and then asked, Teacher, seriously, how long have they been like this? Grindelwald looked at Charles with a smirk. As soon as I met Aberforth, I got into a fight with your master. Boy, I have to say, you are really a genius. You can make Albus and Aberforth work together. One thing they wear in the same clothes. Quote. As Grindelwald spoke, the smile on his face became more and more arrogant, and Charles even began to suspect that if there was something else going on later, Grindelwald would have to find a camera and use his camera to record it with all his might. Down this scenario. Ciel spread his hands helplessly and replied, No, trust me, teacher, my original intention was definitely not to make the two of them like this. In fact, I just wanted to ease the relationship between the two at the beginning. Regarding Ciel's explanation, Grindelwald just curled his lips, but his eyes still looked at the farce behind the wall with interest, and answered Ciel in a perfunctory manner. Don't tell me that, and when it's over, go and explain to the two Dumbledores. As soon as Grindelwald's words were over, Ciel broke out in a lot of cold sweats. At first, he thought about getting rid of it, and completely forgot whether it would be settled by Choho in the future. Shouldn't it be? Ciel said with a slightly embarrassed tone and comforting words that he didn't even believe. Fortunately, the two Dumbledores behind the wall still knew the priorities, and they were very restrained, which could be seen from the fact that Aberforth had never used any large-scale magic. In the end, Albus sighed and put down his wand first after picking up Aberforth's magic. Aberforth, I think we should act. No matter what festivals you and I have, I don't think it should affect what we do next, right? And I've begun to wonder what the little guy is using. Only then can you be willing to take risks, even willing to take risks with me. Quote. As soon as Albus's words fell, the chubby Aberforth on the opposite side hurriedly threw a magic spell, but Albus gave him more with just a slight sideways movement. Seeing that his magic didn't hit the tall and thin figure on the other side, Aberforth said angrily, "All of this has nothing to do with you, old bastard. It's better not to delay me later, let's talk first. I will never help you if there is any problem." Chapter 231-action begins. Aberforth snorted coldly, glanced at Albus who was beside him, waved his wand and disappeared from everyone's sight. After seeing Aberforth disappear, Albus sighed helplessly, then waved his wand and disappeared. Seeing that there was no fun to watch, Grindelwald just stretched his waist, cancelled the magic on himself and Seal, took a sip of the coffee on the table, and then said slowly, "Wait a minute and we're going to start too." Seal nodded and remembered the action plan he had made. First, let the two Dumbledores enter the bank to find the vault, and then when they got the gold cup, Grindelwald detonated the bomb that had sneaked in and placed in advance, causing chaos. Chaos goes deep into Gringotts to find some clues about the Chaos Realm. Thinking of this, Seal remembered the crux of the problem, leaned in front of Grindelwald and asked in a low voice, "Teacher, have you put it away?" Grindelwald looked at Seal who was cautious, nervous and excited with some disgust, and nodded calmly. Seeing Grindelwald nodding, Seal suddenly became interested. "Teacher, can you tell me where you put the bomb? I'm really curious." Seeing Seal looking like a curious baby, Grindelwald nodded with a smirk. "Of course, I put it at the door of Dumbledore's family vault. According to the equivalent of your bomb, I dare not say anything else. Breaking that bronze gate open is definitely within your grasp." "What?" Seal exclaimed, then stood up with a serious face and was about to go outside, but was grabbed by Grindelwald. "What are you going to do?" Grindelwald looked at the extremely serious Seal with some doubts. "I'm going to warn Gringotts that there is a big Muggle bomb at the door of the Dumbledore family vault." Seal replied to Grindelwald's words very seriously, looking at Ciel's expression as if he was not joking. Seeing Ciel's unusually serious expression, Grindelwald finally didn't hold back and laughed. "Ha ha ha ha, okay, don't make fun of you. I knew from a guess that you were still hitting Dumbledore. Be careful of the legacy of that old Belido. Don't worry, I just found a place to put it, and it won't affect anyone." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal finally calmed down and sat down again. He returned to his previous appearance, and continued to say to Grindelwald, "Don't worry, I'm just skinning, the main thing is to be afraid of the teacher and you. There is no pension after retirement, you should know, teacher, I am a Muggle." Quote. Grindelwald looks like you continue to quibble. I'm listening and I look at Seal without saying anything. Seal can only scratch his head in embarrassment and stop quibbling, sit down with peace of mind, drink coffee and wait for action to begin. It wasn't long before there was a loud noise from outside, and Seal and Grindelwald immediately got up and walked to the street of Diagon Alley. Seal stared blankly at a very miniature sticker emerging from the roof of Gringotts. Mushroom Cloud stared blankly at Grindelwald beside him. "Teacher, tell the truth, where did you put it? I swear those gadgets I made definitely have this effect." While speaking, Seal pointed to the mini mushroom cloud above Gringotts and said to Grindelwald beside him. Grindelwald was very calm, patted the dust that did not exist on his body, and then continued, "I didn't put it anywhere. I used magic to copy one and put it on the roof, and the other was thrown on the track of the underground vault." Grindelwald just finished speaking, and he seemed to remember something, and then he continued, "Ah, I remembered. I used magic to add a little bit to the little thing you made. It's not a big deal, don't thank me. Well, we're going to get started." After finishing speaking, he started walking towards Gringotts with a very elegant pace against the fleeing crowd. From behind, Seal stared blankly at the mini mushroom cloud that hadn't dissipated in the sky. He was very eager to complain, and muttered to himself, "This is called adding a little bit of food. This motherfucker is adding a million dots of food, right?" After the complaints were finished, Seal waved his wand to hide his figure and quickly followed Grindelwald's footsteps. Grindelwald is very talented and bold and did not hide his figure, or he didn't bother to hide his figure at all. Think about it, after all, most people in Gringotts should focus on the underground vault, not the underground vault. On both of them. But after all, stealing and robbing are two concepts. Gringotts has not been invaded so blatantly for almost a century. At most, it is just a secret invasion like the magic stone. When Shire and Grindelwald came to the Hall of Gringotts, as expected, there was no one in the hall now, and the tattered roof fell and smashed a lot of things. Seal saw that there was no one around, and only then did he show his body. Looking at Grindelwald, who was standing in the middle of the dilapidated hall, he said, "Teacher, stop posing, where should we go?" Grindelwald ignored Seal. After looking around, he came to the entrance of the underground vault. Looking at the chaotic scene below, and hearing the noisy voice, Grindelwald laughed disdainfully. These goblins are as deadly as they were 1,000 years ago, and they still like to go underground, like a bunch of bugs. After saying that, he jumped down without waiting for Seal to react. Grindelwald's action startled Seal, and he walked quickly to the entrance, looked at the dark underside, and involuntarily thought of the classic saying, "When you stare into the abyss also staring at you." But thinking of Grindelwald's actions, Seal finally gritted his teeth. After taking a few deep breaths, Seal jumped after Grindelwald with his eyes closed and the mood to die. Then there was the long free fall time, and Seal even felt that at this speed, he had almost fallen to the center of the earth. After an unknown amount of time, Seal felt an invisible force slowly dragging him and began to slow down, and Seal opened his eyes and looked around. Surrounded by black rocks, Grindelwald has returned to his original appearance, standing not far below Seal, looking at a huge white stone gate in the distance with his hands behind his back. Seeing Seal landing slowly, Grindelwald smiled slightly. "I thought you were too cowardly to jump." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal gave Grindelwald an angry look, and then he looked at the huge white stone gate in front of him. Chapter 232-Goblin Ambition. The entire stone gate with the door frame looks almost 5 meters high. It is carved from a single piece of white marble. There are countless figures carved on the door frame, but without exception, all of them are the ugly face of the goblin. Of course, none of this was enough to surprise Seal. What really surprised Seal was the fact that the gate made of a huge white marble was actually engraved with the Tree of Truth on the Gate of Truth in Full Metal Alchemist. If it wasn't for Grindelwald, who was still standing by his side, at this moment Seal would even think that he was acting in a play or crossing again. After all, this thing seemed to have nothing to do with the Harry Potter world he was in. Connect. Grindelwald just looked at the door in front of him quietly, and after a long time he smiled disdainfully. "Ha, these lowly goblins, the Gate of Truth. The truth is in the hands of goblins. Funny stuff." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal looked at Grindelwald beside him with big eyes in surprise. Is this thing really called the Gate of Truth? Seal has begun to doubt his life, so he didn't act. Is there really such a thing in the world of Harry Potter? Grindelwald looked at Seal's puzzled and shocked look, and smiled disdainfully. "Ha, it's nothing but an outdated legend. According to legend, Dante, the first alchemist who came into contact with alchemy, was because he found the realm of the gods. After seeing the Gate of Truth, I realized the mystery of alchemy, which led to the emergence of alchemy, a new branch of magic." Quote. As soon as Grindelwald's voice fell, Seal was already surprised and didn't know what to say. "Wait, Dante. The Dante who wrote Dante's Divine Comedy?" Hearing Seal's question, Grindelwald looked at Seal with a clear expression. "It's him. According to legend, in his later years, he wrote a book about his travels to the divine realm, and the magic world follows the book. I said that I searched for a long time and couldn't find the realm of the gods that Dante said, so I decided that Dante was a liar. On the contrary, the Muggles regard Dante's book as a classic. It seems to be a masterpiece now, which is also very funny. A founder of alchemy, in his later years, he was called the world's biggest liar by the magic circle. A selfish person who just wants to hold on to his secrets, but is regarded as a legend in the Muggle world, who knows nothing about magic." Seal felt that his brain was about to crash. Ever since he walked into Gringotts, Seal had begun to feel that his cognition was being broken again and again. Now he actually told him that Dante was also an alchemist. Seal felt that his control over Harry Potter's world had begun to crumble a bit. Fortunately, Grindelwald was still by Seal's side, so he didn't let Seal continue to doubt his life. After knocking on the marble door in front of him with his wand, Grindelwald continued. Okay, we're going to move on. Time waits for no one. These goblins are really extravagant. Such a huge white marble gate is just a transfer item. After he finished speaking, Grindelwald instructed Seal to put his hand on the door, one for each of them. Just as Seal put his hand up, he felt an irresistible suction coming from the gate. At the same time, the magic in Seal's body began to flow uncontrollably like a flood that opened the gate. The arms on the door began to pour into the door continuously. As the gate absorbed more and more magic power from the two, the tree of truth carved on the gate became brighter and brighter. Fortunately, Grindelwald's magic power was huge, and Seal also had the magic that Dumbledore gave him. The stone necklace constantly replenishes the magic power. Otherwise, according to the speed of the gate's absorption of magic power, such a short time will definitely turn a not-so-outstanding little wizard into a human. With the absorption of magic power, the tree of truth on the gate became brighter and brighter, and finally seemed to have reached a critical value. The gate suddenly cut off the absorption of magic power. Just when Seal was still thinking about what was going on, the tree of truth on the gate emits a dazzling white light. Stimulated by the white light, Seal closed his eyes at once. When Seal opened his eyes, although his hand was still on the door, the surrounding environment had changed. Okay, we're here. Grindelwald's words awakened Seal, and Seal turned to look at his surroundings, which made Seal's jaw drop to the ground in surprise. What's the situation? The Ministry of Magic. Are we at the Ministry of Magic? Charles looked at the surrounding environment in surprise, and it was no surprise that it was exactly the same as the Ministry of Magic. If he had to say the difference, then it might be that the rows of fireplaces and the gaps between the porcelain were no longer dark. Rather, it is filled with gold that looks very rich. Oh, and another point, that is, there is no such popularity as the Ministry of Magic. The whole space looks lifeless, and there is absolutely no creature, or anything that moves. Grindelwald looked at the surrounding environment, and after hearing Seal's exclamation, the disdain on his face became heavy again, and he snorted coldly, HMPH, these lowly goblins seem to have a lot of plans. Before standing on the bright side, you have already begun to get used to the life of the Ministry of Magic. But that's fine, it saves me the time to find things. Let's go quickly, Seal, and when the goblins are done with the mess left by the Dumbledore brothers, they will definitely come back. After Grindelwald finished speaking, he took his own steps and started to walk into the Ministry of Magic. The purpose was very clear, the archives. Seeing that Grindelwald looked like I was in a bad mood, don't mess with me for the time being, Seal pouted and shouted, wait for me, and then hurriedly ran after the departing Grindelwald's back. It is also a coincidence that in order to satisfy their own ideas, these goblins, in this one-to-one copy of the Ministry of Magic, except for some insignificant offices, such as Mr. It was transformed into a utility room and everything else was exactly the same. The corresponding archives are also the same, which is also very convenient for Grindelwald and Seal. Of course, what the two of them didn't know was that in this Goblin's Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries, there was nothing that could be compared to that of the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries. If the two of them really went to the place of the Department of Mystery Handling, maybe the two of them would really be able to find some different things that break the three views. Chapter 233-Real Chaos. Just as Seal and Grindelwald were rummaging through the archives in this Goblin's one-to-one copy of the Ministry of Magic, there was a tightly closed door in the place that was originally the Department of Mysteries. The gate is still incomparably tall, with the frame made of bronze, the facade made of silver, and the decoration made of gold. As the core, Jinjalong is responsible for the decision-making power of most things, and is in an extremely important position. As a middle-level cadre, Yin Kexi is still the face of the entire chaotic country. As for the large number of copper nut at the bottom, although the number is huge, it is just like the door frame, that is, the group that supports the operation of the entire organization, but is the least valued group. This is very capitalistic. Fortunately, Seal is still a human after crossing the border. If it is in this goblin organization in the chaotic country, then I am afraid it is not Harry Potter, but a story about a prince and General Xiangning. Inside the gate at this time, at the end of the long passage is a huge office. A goblin with a golden beak mask and a red cloak is in this office, looking at the busyness of his subordinates, bowing his head and meditating silently. It is the legendary Jin Chi who single-handedly contributed to the appearance of Voldemort. At this moment, his mood is actually not good at all. The Chaos Kingdom is an existent subject to the Goblin Council. However, because it is a parliamentary system, gangs form factions, and various small groups emerge in an endless stream in this parliament, and there are countless groups such as shadow parliaments and elder gangs. Disputes over rights and interests between various small groups are like a big hairball that is constantly being cut and chaotic, filled with all kinds of betrayals and allies in various interests all the time. To put it badly, in the entire Fairy Council, all those who can sit firmly on the Daoyutai are a bunch of guys who play fairies politics and understand it well. But this also caused a problem, that is, the hearts of the Jin Galleons in the whole chaotic country are not the same, and it can even be said that each has his own thoughts. The most amusing thing for this gang of goblins in secret is that the parliament has long been established, and even an organization like them was born, but those lazy wizards of the Ministry of Magic still think that the whole goblin is still owned by the so-called controlled by the elders. You must know that the so-called elder can control the part of the goblins on the ground at most. As for the goblins here, basically all of them obey the council. Of course, they are still loyal to the existence of the chief elder. This incident is already a private joke of every goblin who has been secretly promoted to join Chaos Realm. Of course, all these jokes, even the struggle for power, are not the things that Jin Chi is worried about at the moment. The thing that worries him today is another. Sitting in his seat silently, looking at the busy subordinates below, and thinking of the alarm just now, Jin Chi felt more and more irritable. In the end, Jin Chi couldn't hold back his emotions, and asked the goblin with a silver mask standing beside him, "Yin Yi, is there any news from Egypt?" After hearing Jin Chi's question, Yin Yi just shook his head and replied, "There is no news, my master. The people we sent there have already begun to doubt the authenticity of the legend." Hearing Yin Yi's words, Jin Chi once again felt that his blood pressure began to soar. He was just sanctioned by Jin Yi not long ago, and he took away what belonged to him. Now even his subordinates are beginning to doubt himself. Jin Chi gritted his back molars and gave Yin Yi an order. "Tell Yin to go and watch in person, and order the spell remover on the Egyptian side to speed up and give me a 24-hour shift. Be sure to find the resurrection potion formula as soon as possible. By the way, what did the purebloods say?" Hearing the question from his boss, Yin Yi remembered the news brought back by his peer, Yin San, and said nothing, just shook his head at his boss, Jin Chi. Seeing Yin shook his head, Jin Chi, who was still sitting on the chair, couldn't sit still at all. He slapped the table angrily and stood up. "These bloody purebloods. A fanatic, now asking them to find the traces of Voldemort, but they are all like castrated pigs. Damn it, I'm mad at me, a bunch of stupid pigs who only know money." Yin Yi asked Yin Si to Yin Lu to search for clues, contact GBP, and ask GBP to help. If he dares to refuse, tell GBP that he will be contacted forever. He should know what it means. After hearing Jin Chi's words, Yin Yi didn't say anything, nodded silently and was about to leave. After all, his boss had arranged a lot of work for him that needed to be arranged. But when he reached the gate, Yin Yi suddenly seemed to remember something, stopped and turned to look at his boss. "Boss, I suddenly thought of something. A man named Peter Pettigrew contacted us not long ago and said he was Voldemort's most loyal servant, but now he needs help." Hearing Yin Yi's words, Jin Chi sat down slowly, looked at his subordinates and asked, "Tell me, what kind of help?" Yin Yi thought for a moment and frowned and replied, He wants us to call the purebloods as soon as possible to put pressure on the Ministry of Magic to arrest Sirius Black as soon as possible. The reason is unknown. Hearing Yin Yi's answer, a plan instantly appeared in Jin Yi's mind. He smiled disdainfully, and said to Yin Yi, "Don't reply to this man for now. Doesn't he call himself Voldemort's most loyal ally? Then just let him go find Voldemort. Wait a minute, and then contact him when everything is ready." Hearing Jin Qi's words, Yin Yi nodded slightly, and then replied as if he had remembered something. "I probably collected some information about these two people. According to the Ministry of Magic, Sirius is really a Death Eater. Dude, the strangest thing is that he was supposed to have only one finger left in that explosion a few years ago." After Jin Qi listened to Yin Yi's information, he lowered his head and thought for a while before answering. "Don't worry about him. He was able to hide in silence for so long. Then it shows that this little dwarf is a cowardly person who is afraid of things. He will never listen to us unless we push him to the end. Tell Yinsen to pay attention to this little dwarf star, and leave him alone for the rest. You must know that giving charcoal in the snow can win people's hearts more than icing on the cake." Chapter 234 The Plan of the Two Teachers. Neither Shire nor Grindelwald knew what was going on inside that gate in the Goblins' imitation Ministry of Magic, and if they knew that a real base in the realm of chaos was not far from them, it was estimated that Grindelwald didn't mind rushing in and firing his signature gas stove. Fortunately, the Kingdom of Chaos usually rarely leaves the gate, so the plan of the two to rummage in the archives almost went smoothly. Of course, the two of them have achieved a lot. This archive room almost records a lot of completed plans and some unfinished plans. These plans all reveal the word, crazy. Many of them are dangerous plans that can directly subvert the magic world. Of course, these dangerous plans have not been implemented, but Grindelwald still found a lot of plans about himself and Voldemort. There was even a plan to assassinate Dumbledore to plunge himself into madness and darkness, so that when he turned the world upside down again, the goblins could take advantage of the emptiness to fully grasp the wizard. Although this plan could not be implemented, the reason is very simple. The above approval also shows the problem, that is, the feasibility is too low. Of course, none of this will delay Grindelwald's anger. Grindelwald already wanted to destroy this archive. The most important thing is that Seal actually discovered a lot about himself in these bankrupt plans. Many of the plans have been established since the first time he was brought into the magical world by Dumbledore. The craziest thing is to assassinate all the people he cares about, which makes Seal feel a chill in his back. Fortunately, the people he cares about have been protected with magic by Lao Dang, otherwise he would not know how crazy these guys are. What will the fairies do? This is not only about Shire's Nest plan. Even Harry, Hermione, Cedric and other top school players have their names in this archive. Even Seal had to admit that in terms of brain holes, no one would dare to be the first if these goblins dared to be the second. Of course, Grindelwald was not polite. He copied each document and packed it into his pocket. Seal didn't have to guess that Grindelwald's pocket was absolutely the same as his tactical chest pack. Don't know how big it will be. But the problem that Ling Shar was puzzled by was that Grindelwald didn't know why he had been copying these unimplemented plans here, and had no intention of looking for the plans that the goblins were already implementing. Seeing that Grindelwald was busy with his work, Seal seized the opportunity to say his own question, and when he heard Seal's question, Grindelwald laughed happily. The plan to implement. No, Seal, don't forget one thing. Strictly speaking, these goblins have nothing but money, so no matter what they implement, we only need to be strong enough. Prepare enough to basically be able to cope with the past. Quote. Seal was even more confused when he heard Grindelwald's words, and before Seal could continue to ask, Grindelwald continued, Dumbledore should have told you about this. He wants to resurrect Voldemort. You should know that, right? Seal nodded suspiciously, remembering his surprise when Dumbledore said this at the beginning of the semester. Seeing Seal looking puzzled, Grindelwald said to Seal while cleaning up the archives that he had messed up, Don't be so suspicious, you should know one thing about Seal, and that is what will happen after Voldemort's resurrection. His resurrection will definitely gather a large group of pure blood to stand behind him again, and after hesitating for so long, none of his men have looked for him. If he is really resurrected this time, then the group will definitely no longer be allowed. Pureblood continued to stand behind him with the mask on. In this case, as long as Voldemort fails again, even if the pureblood family is not raided, they will lose all their rights. You must know that unless the pureblood family who has lost their rights has real technology, such as Ollivander, the others will slowly drown in the torrent of time. And what I am doing now is to give the last blow to the pureblood. When Voldemort falls again, as long as the whole package of these goblins is announced to the masses, then these plans are not really implemented, but suspicion is also it will stand between these goblins and those pure-blood families who have not been raided. Even when ordinary people don't trust these goblins anymore, Seal, guess what happens? After Seal heard Grindelwald's explanation, he began to lower his head and ponder. After a while, Shire thought about it for a long time, and even sipped his teeth in surprise. Grindelwald and Dumbledore must do this. Wizards no longer trust goblins. Goblins will definitely lose Gringotts right to control the wizarding economy, so unless the expelled goblins are like their own 1,000-year-old like the ancestors, he picked up his old job as a craftsman again, otherwise he could only wait to be starved to death. The goblins who lost all their rights and turned into a mass of sand are actually not scary. The most important thing is that those pure bloods, when everything is in the hands of wizards, then for wizards and other wizards, there are no secrets. Even because of the suspicion between fairies and purebloods, the possibility of the two working together again has been cut to the point of inexorability. Thinking of this, Seal couldn't help but give Grindelwald a thumbs up and said, "If you want to be ruthless, it's you and the teacher who are ruthless." Grindelwald glanced at Seal very calmly, and suddenly laughed, gave Seal an angry look. "Stinky boy, you still have a lot to learn. By the way, don't tell the old bee I'm with you." Having said so much, he never let me tell you the details. Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal was stunned for a moment, and nodded subconsciously. Before Seal could respond to ask again, Grindelwald stood up, patted the dust that did not exist on his body, and then turned to Seal. Said, "Okay, we should go. If we don't go, those goddamn fairies should come back. It will be difficult to leave then. Your time should be almost up. I don't know what happened to the old bee. It's a pity that I can't see it with my own eyes." After finishing speaking, without waiting for Seal to respond, he started to walk back with Seal, and behind Grindelwald, Shargan hesitated. But thinking about Grindelwald's last words, Seal couldn't help but laugh. Is very full of AQ's spirit, let go of the burden in his heart at once. Forget it, the water will come to cover and the soldiers will come to block it. My two teachers are not dead yet, what should I worry about? After all, it seems like it would be interesting to see those two Dumbledore rob a bank. Seal, who was rooted behind Grindelwald, muttered silently in his heart. Chapter 235-deviated plot. In the end, neither Seal nor Grindelwald went to see the excitement of Dumbledore. The two of them disappeared from the hall full of Aurors and left Gringotts, the bank of the wizarding world. When Seal changed back into a small suit and asked Fawkes to take him back to the toilet again, the time was just right. Seal took out his watch and looked at it, and he just left for about 15 minutes. When Seal stood up and patted the dust that didn't exist on his body, and returned to Hagrid's side again, nothing unexpected happened. Hagrid's mood was not very good, it could even be said that he was a little depressed. The hearing was also interrupted by Gringotts again, and according to Hagrid, the hearing resumed shortly after Shire left to go to the toilet. This time, because of the lack of Seal's eloquence, the situation took a turn for the worse. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't know what happened at the end, Fudge left in a hurry with a large group of officials from the Ministry of Magic. Maybe Buckbeak would end up being sentenced to death on the spot and executed immediately, but Fudge asked Hagrid to bring a sentence to Shire before he left, about the need to treat himself to tea after the hearing because of some emergency. The matter has been postponed indefinitely. Fuji showed a huge apology for this, but Seal gave a big sigh of relief. After all, Seal is actually not good at or disgusted with acting like this with Fuji. It's better to cancel it, so that Fuji can feel that he owes him. At that time, I can also listen to the opinions about Sirius. Everyone was very satisfied with this hearing plan, except for Hagrid, although he knew that Seal could guarantee that even if Buckbeak was really sentenced to death, Seal could use some small means to make it possible. He survived safely, but after all, being convicted in court made Hagrid feel very uncomfortable. In the end, Seal stood by Hagrid's side to comfort him for a long time, and then Hagrid regained his strength and took Seal back to Hogwarts, although Hagrid was not so enthusiastic along the way. The two of them had just returned to the school when they saw the three of Hermione waiting for them at the school gate. Seal thought about it and secretly told Hagrid not to tell them about what he wanted to do with small tricks. The man then greeted the three of them. The five of them walked while listening to Hagrid complaining about Malfoy and the Ministry of Magic about magical beasts. They had just arrived at Hagrid's hut, and before Shire sat down, a silver phoenix flew to Shire's house. Before Dumbledore's voice came out with a dignified silver phoenix, "Charles, if you return to school, please come to the headmaster's office immediately." Hearing his teacher's call, Seal spread his hands towards the four of them, said sorry, then stood up and hurried to the principal's room. As soon as he entered the door, Shire realized that something was wrong. The atmosphere in the headmaster's room was inexplicably serious. Dumbledore had changed back to the way he used to be at school at this time. He sat in his chair and looked solemnly on the table of a golden cup. Charles looked at his teacher with some doubts. "Teacher, what happened?" After Dumbledore motioned Charles to sit down, he said nothing, just picked up his Elder Wand and tapped the gold cup on the table lightly. With the crisp sound of the wand hitting the golden cup on the table quickly filled with red liquid automatically, and the aroma of strong wine permeated the whole room in an instant. Seal was still a little puzzled, looking at Dumbledore who said nothing, but before Seal could ask his own question, Dumbledore across the table grabbed the golden cup and drank the liquid completely. Dumbledore's actions startled Seal. "Teacher, what are you doing? That's Hufflepuff's gold cup. It's a Horcrux." But Dumbledore, who drank the liquid in the golden cup, laughed, looked at Charles and said, "Very good wine, Shire, do you want some? According to my research, this golden cup can make anything you want." Drinks. Quote. Shire shook his head like a rattle, looking at his teacher with doubts. For a while he didn't understand what medicine was sold in his teacher's gourd. Seeing Seal's puzzled look, Dumbledore smiled helplessly, and then said, "Sorry, Seal, although we have found the golden cup that Hufflepuff lost, this golden cup is not Voldemort's Horcrux." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal's jaw dropped in surprise. "Impossible. It's impossible." Seeing Seal standing up in surprise, Dumbledore's face also became serious, and he continued, "I'm sorry, Seal, but this is indeed not Voldemort's Horcrux, or it should have been Voldemort's Horcrux before." Hearing his teacher's explanation, Seal didn't know what to say for a while. At this time, Seal's brain was in chaos, and the plot that should have been motionless at this moment actually deviates at this moment. For a time, a huge sense of unease enveloped Seal in an instant, and Seal sat down a little decadently and began to think about what happened. But no matter how Seal thought about it, he didn't know why the Horcrux that was supposed to be in Bella's vault became like this. Seeing Seal's frown, Dumbledore sighed helplessly, and then continued, "After I brought the golden cup back, I carefully examined the golden cup. Not long ago, this golden cup was placed on the. It is indeed a very powerful black magic item, and even the strong traces of black magic remain on the golden cup. But for some unknown reason, Voldemort's soul on the golden cup was taken out, and even the golden cup itself was re-repaired with high technology. The traces of the repair seem to cover up the golden cup once. Trace. So, I'm starting to suspect that it's not just our group collecting Voldemort's Horcruxes, it looks like someone else is doing the same thing as us." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal's brows furrowed even tighter. Seal knew that in the original book, apart from Voldemort's own words, The only people looking for Horcruxes were Harry and his party, but Harry didn't know what to do. There is no doubt that in this plan, it should be still at school. For a while, Seal seemed to have fallen into a trap of thinking, and while biting his fingers, he started pacing in the principal's room unconsciously. Dumbledore looked at Seal's appearance, and finally he couldn't help but sighed and stopped Seal. "Charles, calm down. Don't trap yourself in the so-called prophecy, otherwise, your result will be same with Voldemort." Chapter 236_changed plot. I have to admit that at this time, Seal was firmly wrapped up by a fear called the unknown. The reason is very simple. Because of what happened in the past few years, no matter how Seal died, the strong corrective power of the plot is basically the same. It will pull things back to where they were. Even if it has many things that don't exist in the plot, the process is actually pretty much the same, so for a long time, it has subtly given Shire a sense of unreality. Now the important Voldemort's Horcrux in the plot has been found in advance, but there is no Voldemort's soul in the Horcrux. This kind of thing happened, and Charles felt the unknown for the first time. It was as if I was originally playing a very realistic game, but suddenly not only was the game turned into the real world, but the original flow was changed. Fortunately, Dumbledore's words successfully pulled Seal back from the confusion and fear of the unknown, and made Seal realize that he was not in a game, but the real world. In the real world, there is no such thing as a plot. Gradually, Seal calmed down, adjusted his mentality, and sat back again. At this time, for the first time, Seal was extremely fortunate that he chose to let Dumbledore in front of him take the Hufflepuff because of his own bad taste. Gold Cup. There is no other reason. If Seal went to get it himself, he didn't know what kind of troubles would occur, and the deviated plot alone made him panic. Seal couldn't help laughing at himself in his heart, and then he looked at Dumbledore in front of him and said slowly, "Thank you, teacher, I won't be addicted to the so-called prophecy." Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore laughed happily. "Yes, Seal, you have to know that the future is not static. A small multiple-choice question will often give birth to a completely different future. As for the so-called prophecies, it is undeniable that Shire, although some prophecies are very accurate, but these can only serve as a reference for the future at most. The most classic example is right in front of your eyes, isn't it?" After speaking, Dumbledore did not forget to point to the Ravenclaw crown that was sealed in a transparent box next to it. The corners of Seal's mouth twitched involuntarily. At this time, Seal had no doubt that if it wasn't for the seal, Voldemort's remnant soul in the crown would be dead. "Come and fight with Dumbledore, even if you were an incomplete soul." Seal smiled helplessly, and then nodded to his teacher again to ensure that he would not be addicted to the so-called prophecy again, and Dumbledore smiled reassuringly. "You can think about it, Seal. In fact, I discovered this a long time ago. At that time, you were too immersed in your own prophecy. It is a good thing to believe in yourself, but it is not a good thing to believe in the future." "Good thing." Hearing Dumbledore's repeated education, Seal couldn't help laughing bitterly. At this time, Seal could indeed feel the care given to him by the old man in front of him, but facing the repeated reminders from the old man, Seal couldn't help but smile. He could only nod his head with a wry smile. At the same time, I was also thinking silently about the next plan in my heart. Since the plot at this time has already appeared uncontrollable deviations, then there is no need to continue to arrange it step by step according to the so-called plot. While dealing with Dumbledore's nagging, Seal began to think about it in his own mind. Speaking of which, even Dumbledore was surprised that he was definitely not a nagging person, and even reminded him that it was already his limit, but facing Seal, Dumbledore felt that no matter how much he nagged, there is a feeling of incomprehensible. Finally, after a long period of nagging, Dumbledore also confirmed that the child in front of him had indeed given up his reliance on the so-called prophecy, and he was relieved to ask a question he had always wanted to know with a smile. "The problem." "Okay, Seal, you said you're paid. Aberforth asked me to remind you before he left, if you can't pay your promised pay before the end of this month, then he may go all the way. Break into Hogwarts to get you." After he finished speaking, Dumbledore looked at Seal curiously. He didn't know what method Seal used to move his brother. With such a feeling of curiosity, Dumbledore was not only in knowledge can feel, in life, he has not felt this feeling for a long time. Hearing Dumbledore's question like an old urchin, Seal even unconsciously made up for it, but Aberforth threatened Dumbledore. Seal felt as if he had discovered something interesting, and in the end he couldn't help but burst out laughing. Under Dumbledore's puzzled gaze, Seal covered his mouth and tried his best to suppress his smile before answering. Dumbledore's words. "Don't worry, teacher. Go meet your brother with me at the end of the month. I will pay you all together at that time. Trust my teacher, it's definitely worth the money." Seal couldn't help but buy a pass, and thought of letting the two brothers supervise each other. After all, Seal is still not sure whether the resurrection stone will make people want to give up hope of life. At present, the only person in Shire's cognition who has resisted the temptation of the resurrection stone is Grindelwald. Lee even admired Charles, and the most important thing was that he didn't have the pain of the two brothers. Seeing Seal resorting to a trick in arranging his meeting with Aberforth again, Dumbledore looked at Seal suspiciously. At this time, he had begun to wonder if it was the son of the stinky boy in front of him. One time bad fun. Fortunately, Seal's face was still very sincere, and Dumbledore chose to believe Seal's words again. "Okay, Seal, I think at my age, I can still hold back my curiosity, right?" Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal smiled mysteriously again but didn't answer. Seeing that Seal didn't answer, Dumbledore sighed helplessly before continuing. "Tell me about the hearing. Kingsley wrote to me about the hearing as soon as it was over. Not surprisingly, Shire, you're acting a little out of the ordinary." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Charles smiled mysteriously, and then continued, "Compared with the hearing, I want to know more about your acting skills, teacher." Chapter 237 _ The Arrest of Peter Pettigrew. Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore was obviously stunned for a moment. He didn't understand what kind of medicine Seal's gourd was selling. Seal didn't care about Dumbledore's reaction. He got off his chair and ran out to the dormitory. That's right, Seal no longer wants to wait for the so-called timing at this time. He has already got on the line with Fudge. According to Fudge's message at the end of the hearing, Seal is very sure that Fudge has thought I'm definitely going to the Ministry of Magic myself. It was also because of the problem of the Golden Cup that Seal was also filled with a sense of crisis that would change sooner or later, so it would be better for Seal to complete some of his plans earlier. I ran all the way to the dormitory, and easily entered Harry's dormitory. At this time, Pettigrew Peter was resting peacefully in his cage, thanks to the transaction between Charles and Sirius Black. After the first attack, Black never appeared at Hogwarts again, and even the big black dog rarely appeared. Gradually, the panicked Peter Pettigrew relaxed his vigilance, even because of Seal flickering about Ron's seed preservation. Peter Pettigrew didn't have time to think about running away. After all, the environment is considered safe because of being drunk and dreaming every day. Before receiving news from Black again, Peter Pettigrew still felt that Hogwarts was the safest at present. Except for the daily potion and running, there was nothing bad. And after such a long period of exercise, Pettigrew also feels that his body is much better. Sometimes he sneaks to a place where no one is in the middle of the night, and Peter Pettigrew will secretly change back into a human shape to see how fit he is. Figure. Because of this, Peter Pettigrew just glanced at Seal when Seal entered Harry's bedroom, and didn't pay any attention to Seal. After all, for him, who is still a rat, the current sober rest time was really nothing. Invaluable. Of course, this attitude was also convenient for Seal. He twitched his wand without hesitation and cast a petrification spell on the rat on Ron's bed, successfully immobilizing Peter Pettigrew who was still at rest. Then Seal stepped forward with confidence, picked up the cage on the bed, and then very cautiously filled several spells. After making sure everything was safe, Seal turned around and wanted to leave with confidence. When he reached the gate, Seal just remembered something, turned to look at the empty bedroom, and took out his wand again, flying the Marauder's map. As Seal's voice fell, under Harry's pillow, A piece of yellowish folded tattered parchment flew into Ciel's hand. Ciel smiled in satisfaction and turned to leave Harry's bedroom. When Ciel came to the headmaster's room again, he threw the immobile Peter Pettigrew in front of Dumbledore. "Teacher, Peter Pettigrew, I think you should know each other." Dumbledore looked at the petrified mouse in the cage and did not speak, but Peter of Pettigrew, who was immobile at this time, was full of fear the moment after Ciel's voice fell. Before Dumbledore could speak, Ciel picked up Fawkes and imitated Dumbledore's handwriting and wrote a message to Snape, asking Snape to come to the headmaster's office with Veritas. Then he patted Fawkes, and under the temptation of a beef jerky, Fawkes reluctantly turned into a flame and disappeared into the principal's room. After doing all this, Ciel stood up contentedly and looked at Dumbledore, who didn't look at him. "Teacher, I'm going to write to Fudge now. I think you should still have time to find out what happened back then." After speaking, he didn't forget to buy a cute one for his teacher. Seeing Ciel's expression, and thinking of the hearing that Ciel said before he left, Dumbledore immediately understood Ciel's intentions. Looking at the desperate petrified rat on his desk, Dumbledore just nodded and said nothing. Seeing Dumbledore nodding, Ciel jumped off the stool with satisfaction and was about to leave. When he reached the gate, Ciel remembered one more thing and turned to look at Dumbledore. "Teacher, don't forget one more thing. Please revise the memory of the dead mouse so that no one can see the flaws." After he finished speaking, the map of Marauders in his arms lit up. Dumbledore saw the map of Marauders in Ciel's arms, and he immediately understood what the memory Ciel was talking about. Smiling and giving Ciel a nod, Ciel left the headmaster's room with confidence and walked towards the owl room, not forgetting to say hello to Snape, who was passing by with a gloomy expression on the road. As for what happened to Peter Pettigrew in the headmaster's office, to be honest, Ciel didn't care. Betrayers were always unwelcome, and Ciel felt that he should just finish what he wanted to accomplish. He whistled and walked in square steps to the owl shed. Ciel chose an owl that flew faster and wrote a letter to Fuji. The letter was flowing like clouds and flowing water. No, and battle wits and bravery with Peter Pettigrew all the way, and finally capture his story. Anyway, how to exaggerate, how to write, and even after writing it, Ciel couldn't stand the extreme exaggeration of the story he wrote. Somewhat disgusted, he handed the letter to the owl. After watching the owl spread its wings and fly high, Ciel stood there and thought about it. Then he took out another piece of paper from his arms, wrote a letter, and found a flying one. After the slow owl whistled all the way to the gate of the school and began to wait with peace of mind. What, you ask who the second letter from Shire was addressed to? Needless to say, of course, it is the opening picture of the Daily Prophet, and the content is entirely attributed to the editor of the BBC reporter Rita Skeeter. The reason for writing the letter is also very simple. Anyway, according to Ciel's prediction, Rita came after Fudge. If Fudge was smart and handled it according to his opinion, Ciel wouldn't mind blowing magic on the Daily Prophet department. If you want to die, Fuji is really hopelessly stupid as in the original book, and it can even be said that if he is going his own way, Ciel will act as if he is not good at acting in the morning. At that time, it is a big deal to let Fuji understand what is public opinion warfare. I believe that no matter what it is, as long as Pettigrew Peter is still in the hands of Ciel, then Ciel is an invincible existence, and Sirius Black will also be remorseful. The worst-case scenario is that the Ministry of Magic will go its own way, but turn a blind eye to Sirius under the pressure of public opinion. Shire felt that no matter which choice Fudge made, Fudge would make a small profit at most, and he would never lose. Chapter 238-Shire's Rainbow Fart. Ciel just stood at the gate of the school and waited for almost an hour. Just when Ciel was about to become Wangfushi, he saw Fuji with a big belly in the distance, and hurried over here with a large group of people. Charles immediately regained his energy, rubbed his face, and put on an elegant smile of a sign, and then he greeted him cleanly. "Hello, Minister Fudge, we meet again." Fudge's expression was not very good. The moment he saw Ciel, he grabbed Ciel's shoulder and asked gloomily, "Charles, is what you said in your letter true? You really caught it, Peter Pettigrew?" Sirius Black is innocent. Where is he now? Hearing Fudge's barrage of questions, Seal calmly got rid of Fudge's grip and replied, "Don't worry, Minister, Peter Pettigrew is still in the principal's room, Professor Dumbledore and Snee. Professor Pooh is watching over him and will never run away. As for what I said in the letter, the process may be a bit exaggerated, but the result is absolutely correct. It was Peter Pettigrew himself who told me his plan back then." Hearing Ciel's confirmation, Fudge's face darkened even more, and even Umbridge, who was wearing pink behind him, put away a disgusting smirk. Umbridge whispered behind Fudge in a shrill voice, "Minister, if this kid really does what he says, then this may be the biggest wrongful conviction in the history of the Ministry of Magic." After listening to Umbridge's words, Fudge understood Umbridge's meaning in a second. His face became darker and darker, looked at Ciel, and said in a bad tone, "Charles, I think you have encountered such a thing. Instead of sending Peter Pettigrew to Dumbledore, the Ministry of Magic should have been contacted directly." How could Ciel not understand what Fuji meant? Ciel really knew Fuji's style too well, and the first thought when he encountered something was definitely not how to deal with it, but how to cover up his fault. This is from the original book. Fudge didn't believe that Dumbledore said that Voldemort had returned, but insisted that as long as he didn't believe it, then Voldemort did not come back. It was even thought that the so-called Voldemort's return was Dumbledore's desire to compete with himself for the right to be Minister of Magic. To sum up, Ciel even knew that Fudge's first reaction was definitely like this, so Ciel also left behind the BBC reporter Rita, but now, Ciel still wants to work hard. After all, the public opinion war was definitely not what Ciel wanted. No, Minister, I think it's a good thing to send it to Dumbledore. With Dumbledore's endorsement, I believe that most people in the magical world will believe in Peter Pettigrew's evil. But breaking the game actually only takes one step, that is a reporter. I have contacted reporter Rita. I believe that my minister, whether it is reporter Rita or the public, they will do it for a fair, dare to admit their fault, and even for themselves. Cheers to the Ministry of Magic for taking responsibility for its mistakes and actively correcting them. Following Ciel's voice, Fuji's face gradually began to change from cloudy to clear. When Ciel's voice ended, Fuji's face was already covered with a warm smile like the sun. Fudge is actually not a fool, he is an out-and-out politician. As a politician who pursues democracy, Fudge hears only one thing in Shire's words, and that is votes. Wherever it is, a just government is loved by the people, even if it is just on the surface. Fudge patted Ciel on the shoulder happily. "You're doing very well, Ciel, I'm starting to like you more and more. When you graduate, I think I'll welcome you to my work." On the surface, Ciel said with a smile that it was his honor, but in his heart he was constantly complaining that after he graduated, the so-called Ministry of Magic had probably been attacked by Voldemort several times. Fudge didn't know what Ciel was complaining about in his heart. At this time, he was standing at the gate of the school in the Grand Catra Quarry, and he even wished that Ciel would graduate and come to his subordinates to help him deal with some things. Political matters. Of course, there is still one person here who turns from cloudy to cloudy with Fudge's cloudy to sunny, and that person is Umbridge. With Fudge boasting about Ciel, all his words revealed his appreciation for Ciel. Umbridge's face became more and more gloomy, and the jealousy in his eyes almost swallowed Ciel. With that jealous look and the smirk on his face, it was difficult for Ciel to not notice the pink old toad. Seeing Umbridge's strangely gloomy face, Ciel let out a goosebump and hurriedly interrupted Fudge's compliments and invitations. No, Mr. Minister, I think the most important thing for me is to finish my studies first. After all, if I die without getting my diploma, my parents might knock my legs off. I don't think Mr. Minister wants me to help you in a wheelchair with my legs broken. What's more, in my opinion, you already have a better assistant than me, and you are not in a hurry to ask me to graduate, right? After he finished speaking, he didn't forget to point to Umbridge who was standing behind Fudge. After Umbridge heard Ciel's words, he quickly dispelled the jealousy in his eyes and looked at Ciel's eyes, full of gratitude and friendliness. Ciel endured the goosebumps all over his body. smiled at Umbridge, and let out a sigh of relief in his heart. Fortunately, he was not remembered by this old toad in advance, otherwise, that one would really be a toad jumping on the instep. Don't want people, but resist people. Seeing that everyone was so comfortable being held by his rainbow fart, Seal hurriedly greeted Fudge and the others to the headmaster's room. After all, as it continued, Seal even felt that he couldn't hold it any longer. When Seal opened the door of the principal's room again, Seal saw such a scene. Peter Pettigrew was tied to a special stool, which looked like Dumbledore's masterpiece. As for Snape, Charles swears that this is the first time he sees an expression on Snape's face, and he still wants to stab someone, and even the hand holding the Veritaserum bottle in his hand, all because it looks a little whitish with force. As for Peter Pettigrew, it looks like he has been given a lot of Veritaserum. He looks sullen, and his face is covered in sweat. What exactly happened to Peter Pettigrew? Chapter 239-Dumbledore's acting. Looking at everything in the principal's office, Seal couldn't help but want to give his old dang a compliment. He arranged Pettigrew in advance, and what Seal admired most was the way that big things were turned into little things. Operation. Subconsciously, everyone at the Ministry of Magic can ignore that Peter Pettigrew is an illegal animagus, but in fact, Fudge and others really subconsciously ignore that Peter Pettigrew is an illegal animagus. Matter. Even Fudge and others were shocked, and the truth of the year had already ignored that what Snape was holding next to him was a powerful Veritaserum that the Ministry of Magic had forbidden to use privately. When Fudge asked Peter Pettigrew, he frantically colored Dumbledore and Snape when everyone was not paying attention to him. Old Deng is still relatively reliable. On the surface, he doesn't move, but his hand shows an okay gesture to Shire behind his back. As for Snape, after giving Shire a glance, he didn't say anything, but silently pretended to be strong. The Veritaserum potion bottle was stuffed into his arms. As for Fudge's question to Peter Pettigrew, Seal has to admit that Old Deng is reliable. Although he did not say anything else, Old Deng seems to have already understood what Shire will do, and has Dwarf Peter's mind has arranged a big capture scene. Even the part about Animagus was arranged by Dumbledore to be skipped, and the focus was still on the Marauders map. So much so that Fudge was amazed at Seal's careful observation after listening to it, and even thought that Seal wanted to come over and check the map. If it wasn't for Dumbledore in the end, it was almost clear that this thing was invented by students to be naughty. It's really not interesting to say that Fuji is a trick-or-treating gadget, otherwise, this thing will definitely be taken away by Fuji in the name of evidence and study it. Seal just took Fuji's reluctant Marauders map into his arms, and the door of the principal's office was pushed open rudely like a gust of wind. A blonde woman with exaggerated eyes walked in suddenly with exaggerated steps. Her hair was delicate, stiff. The weird big roll, matched with her big chin face, looked very awkward. She wore a pair of bejeweled glasses. Her fat fingers clutched a crocodile leather handbag. Her fingernails were 2 inches long and painted red, and after completely ignoring everyone in the room, she focused on Peter Pettigrew strapped to a chair. After marveling around Peter for a while, the woman seemed to see everyone in the room and started to greet everyone. "Oh, Merlin. Minister Fuji, long time no see." After saying this, he stretched out his hand and shook hands with Fuji. It seemed that the two were very familiar with each other. The smile on Fuji's face had never faded, and it seemed that they had a good relationship. After the two finished greeting, the woman came to Dumbledore again and said, "Long time no see, Professor Dumbledore. I'm Rita Skeeter, graduated from Ravenclaw. I think you must have forgotten me." Dumbledore reached out a friendly hand and shook hands with the woman in front of him, then said with a smile, "Oh, Miss Rita, I don't think I have forgotten you. I am your faithful to those about Dumbledore readers. After all, it's fun to learn about your past from someone else's mouth, isn't it?" Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal didn't laugh out loud. This was the first time that Seal felt that his teacher was at risk of being led astray by him. Look, Gandalf, the yin-yang eccentric learner. Only called the strongest, worthy of being Mr. Dumbledore of the Great Onmyoji. As for Rita, after hearing Dumbledore's words, she could only smile embarrassedly, and took her hand out of Dumbledore's big hand. After all, she was still very clear about what she was writing. Fortunately, Rita's face has been mellow and mellow after years of making up the journalistic career, and soon she entered the state of work, and began to interview a series of things about Peter Pettigrew and Sirius Black. Fuji is also very good at showing that the Ministry of Magic will definitely investigate the time of the year seriously, and there are many words such as giving the magic world a bright and sunny day. Rita was also very excited. The quill behind her was almost writing the afterimage, but the last interview was not very pleasant. In Fudge's view, these should be the credit of the Ministry of Magic, and Dumbledore thought that these were all. It should be Charles's credit. After the two exchanged openly and secretly for a while, at the same time they aimed their spear at Seal, who was eating melons. Seal looked at the two with real eyes. Very calmly, he cleared his throat and expressed his opinion. The credit goes to the Ministry of Magic. After Seal finished expressing his views, Fudge looked at Dumbledore with a deep sense of pride, while Dumbledore looked at Seal with disappointment. Rita seemed to be very excited to grasp this point, and the quill behind her seemed to be even more excited, and the already fast-writing courier was abruptly raised again. In the end, Fudge escorted Pettigrew Peter away with a smug expression, while Rita stayed on the pretext of wanting to interview Charles alone. Of course, the final interview was definitely not that pleasant. Seal didn't give any interviews at all. When Rita randomly found an empty classroom and wanted to interview Seal, Seal didn't hesitate to use illegal the animagus thing threatens Rita. When Seal uttered the word beagle, Rita had a visibly frightened look on her face, and finally, under Seal's instructions, she honestly reported on the original manuscript. Even the main focus is on the Ministry of Magic's about to restart a series of cases against Sirius Black, and the credit goes to the Ministry of Magic. As for the series of confrontations between Charles himself and Dumbledore and Fudge in the headmaster's office just now, it is take one. After sending Rita away with a smile, Charles slowly came to the principal's room again. At this time, Dumbledore was sitting behind the table and eating his favorite cockroach pile with a smile. After seeing Seal coming in, the smile on his face seemed to be even stronger. "Do you want some Seal?" The corners of Seal's mouth twitched and he refused directly, but facing the other candies on Dumbledore's table, Seal was not polite at all. The two foxes, one big and one small, ate their candies with a smile, and kept discussing them. Things today. There is one thing that Seal has to admit, that is, Lao Deng's acting skills are really good, and he has the feeling of Tony Leung. That disappointing look is absolutely impossible for Seal to act anyway. Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore laughed and said that maybe when he retired, he could try to make Muggle movies or something, and maybe he could continue to shine. Chapter 240 come to an end. As for Harry's side, Seal said that this year, he no longer wanted to interfere too much with his old Deng's Savior development plan. There were enough strange things this year. At this time, Seal just wanted to spend his time in peace. Last quiet semester. Anyway, in his heart, Seal has already decided that the plot or something has collapsed, and he doesn't need to help Harry complete Lao Deng's plan for the so-called plot. But there is one thing, in any case, Harry is still very interesting as a friend, not to mention Hermione's good friend. If the young man does encounter difficulties, Seal doesn't mind helping out. As for the poor Buckbeak, Charles said he was tired and left it to Harry to solve it. We can't let our savior have a dull semester, right? Dumbledore smiled and affirmed Seal's behavior of harassing his friend. Seal had no idea at first, but after hearing Dumbledore say this, he had a wicked smile, causing countless bad things to Dumbledore. Idea. One thing to say, if Seal is still a normal human form sitting opposite Dumbledore, those bad moves made by Seal would have been enough for Dumbledore to suspect that Seal was possessed by demons in the Middle Ages. A holy burn for Charles. Of course, pay attention to what Seal is out. As for whether the trick is damaged or not, whether Dumbledore can use it or not, it is not a matter that Seal can care about. At this time, Seal really wants to go to the kitchen and get something to eat. Then he hurriedly returned to his warm little bed, enjoying the peaceful life of his last semester. Don't blame Charles for thinking so, Peter Pettigrew has already been released. Thanks to the cover-up of himself and Dumbledore, everyone at the Ministry of Magic will never know that Pettigrew is an illegal animagus. Even if you know, with Peter, who is now in great shape, you can also complete Azkaban's prison escape. Don't forget, until now, the Ministry of Magic does not know how Sirius escaped from prison. As for whether Pettigrew goes to Voldemort or not, there is no need to think about it at all, unless he can completely give up magic, or be a mouse for the rest of his life. Otherwise, going to Voldemort is almost the only way for him. What Charles didn't know was that there was a group of big hands behind the scenes that kept pushing this to happen, and even after Sirius announced at the Ministry of Magic how he escaped, it didn't stop Pettigrew. Peter's escape. Of course, this is a later story. At this time, Sha'ur was already satisfied and full of food and felt that everything had come to an end, thinking about the good life in the future and preparing for a solo with Zhou Gong. Just before going to bed, Seal always felt that he still had something to do, but he couldn't remember what it was. This caused Seal to collapse, and it was not until the middle of the night that Seal was dazed. Fell asleep. On the Seal side, everything has come to an end, but the storm of the magic world has just been suspended. Early the next morning, along with the publication of Rita's article in the Daily Prophet, the entire magical world was in an uproar. Who would have thought that the notorious betrayer Black was actually a good person? Not only that, Black also tried his hardest to redeem himself in the ghost place of Azkaban, while at the same time he was able to react immediately when he discovered the murderer, and he had the potential to pursue and kill to avenge his brother's revenge. Almost instantly, Sirius Black became the #1 hero of the entire magical world, and some people have even begun to publicly express their desire to become true friends with Sirius Black. But our main lord huddled in the screaming shack with a dumbfounded face, looking at the newspaper in his hand and didn't know what was going on. Good guy, what should I do when I wake up from a wanted criminal to become a famous hero and star in the magic world? Online wait, more urgent. This sentence should be the most intuitive feeling to describe Blake's waking up and seeing the newspaper this morning. Confused, Blake finally decided to write to ask his trade partner, Seal. After receiving Black's letter, Seal just briefly explained what he had done, and explained that Black only needs to go to the Ministry of Magic now, but he must show his hatred for Peter Pettigrew. That is, it is very difficult to meet. It's like taking a bite of each other's flesh. After Sirius received Seal's reply, he pondered for a long time and didn't understand why Seal made such arrangements, but one thing Seal was right was that if he really saw Peter Pettigrew, then he would definitely have nothing to do with it. Do not hesitate to tear off a piece of flesh from the opponent's body. If it is not controlled, it is estimated that he will keep tearing it off. Unsurprisingly, the old story of Harry's parents also became a good talk at school, and many people even began to look for friends with Sirius as an example. Iron brothers, hanging on their shoulders in 2s and 3s everywhere, making people smile. Of course, among all of them, Harry and Lupin are the most open. Lupin was just happy for his good friend to be reconciled, and he had also investigated the whole thing back then. However, because of his identity as a werewolf and the slightest people's words, even if he lobbied everywhere, he didn't play a big role, and even went to Azkaban to help Sirius escape from prison. Refused. Now that his good friends have been grieved, Lupin couldn't be happier. He even worked harder when he opened a small stove for Harry. The meticulous Seal, and when he was resting, was very happy to tell Harry a lot of the past. As for Harry, he must be the happiest person. He was originally lonely, but because of Seal's manipulation, he had an extra godfather for no reason. Harry's first reaction was that he had a relative. Even the poor child had begun to fantasize about his happy life with his godfather during the summer vacation. Of course, Harry was very grateful to Seal. Of course, there are people who are unhappy. The first one is Snape. Although he has figured out who killed Lily, the fact that his nemesis turned into a hero still makes Snape feel like he has swallowed a frog alive. Same disgusting. Next may be our classmate Ron. Until now, he didn't know that his mouse was actually Peter Pettigrew, and thought it was his pressure on Banban that made Banban run away from home. As for the last one, it might be our Hagrid. Although poor Hagrid was happy for Sirius, Hagrid couldn't help it whenever he saw Buckbeak lying quietly in his yard. Sad.